What if during Brother Smalley's prayer, he said, and we pray for the vindication of your name? How would you have reacted? Oh no, feel sorry for Gene. Well, that's true in English. Over the years, we have tended to be very careful, haven't we, about saying the sanctification of Jehovah's name and the vindication of his sovereignty. But is it necessarily wrong for us to say that Jehovah's name could be vindicated? Well, back in 1965, the Awake magazine answered yes, it would be wrong. Then in 1995, the Watchtower made the point that it re-emphasized that. It said, no one's questioning Jehovah's name, so there's no need to vindicate that name. But the more we look at this subject, the more we see a need to adjust our understanding, particularly in English. So let's think about the words associated with this problem. First of all, sanctify. What does sanctify mean? Well, it means to make holy or to treat something as holy. And it's very appropriate, isn't it, that we pray for the sanctification of Jehovah's name? That's exactly what Jesus told us to do. Let your name be sanctified. So you can relax. There's no change with regard to that. But what about the word vindicate? Well, vindicate usually indicates exonerating or proving that someone is correct in something they've done. Perhaps they've been criticized and then they're proved to be true or correct. And what about the word name? Does it just refer to an identification or a label? Well, that's usually not the case in the Bible, is it? It oftentimes refers to the reputation of the person, not just their identifying name or label. For example, in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1, it tells us a good name is to be chosen rather than great wealth. Now, in that case, name is referring to the reputation of the person. So let's think for a few minutes. What really has Satan criticized down through time? Well, first of all, he's criticized Jehovah's reputation, his name. And secondly, he has criticized the rightfulness of Jehovah's sovereignty, or in other words, the way of ruling. So really, both of these things, Jehovah's reputation and his way of ruling, need to be vindicated. Satan has tried to besmirch the holy name of Jehovah in many ways. One way is by painting him as a vengeful, harsh God, or in the churches of Christendom believing that he is a God that burns people in a fiery hell. Or in the scriptures we see him implying that Jehovah is a liar who holds back good things from his creatures. Well, in that case we can see that Jehovah's name or reputation does need to be exonerated, or in other words, vindicated. So, in summary, Jehovah's sovereignty certainly needs to be vindicated, as we've always said. But also his name as a loving God, his reputation needs to be vindicated. So it's not wrong for us to say that these actions of vindicating Jehovah's sovereignty, vindicating his name, lead to the sanctification of his name. Now at this point you're trying to think, what does that mean? Simply put, it's not wrong to say we pray for the vindication of Jehovah's name, because his reputation certainly needs to be exonerated. And what a privilege we have to be part of that. Well, what a way to start the annual meeting, right off the block. New understanding. So this is how we're going to start, with the chairman saying a few words. What else is on the program? Well, we're looking forward to seeing what we can enjoy. To start with, we're going to consider some aspects with regard to our loving Heavenly Father and how he often does things unexpectedly. And to do that, we're going to have our summary of the Watchtower for this week. Brother Gaius Glockentin, who is a helper to the publishing committee of the governing body, is going to take us through the summary. If you have your magazine there, you may like to follow along. But the governing body has given some instructions to Brother Glockentin that he would use those to make comments from among the helpers and their wives who are based here at Warwick. So it'll give you a chance to get to meet some of them as well. So Brother Gockington, we look forward to the summary of the Watchtower.
Are we willing to wait patiently on Jehovah? This might be very difficult at times. However, as we were reminded in the preceding article, it is possible. And the examples of faithful men and women of old, they tell us how to do it. They can help us to wait patiently. This is very important, as this week's article based on Philippians 4 verse 7 highlights the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts. Jehovah can do the unexpected by accomplishing things we could never imagine. This article is vital for us, since it will strengthen our trust in Him as we will continue to wait patiently for Him to act in our behalf. Now in paragraphs 1 and 2, an explanation is given to the picture that we can see here on page 8. And we would like to know what events in Philippi led to the imprisonment of Paul and Silas. Brother Daniel Molchen, please.
The opening picture of the article depicts Paul and Silas in stocks in prison in Philippi. They had been preaching when they were attacked by a mob. The mob took them to the marketplace where they were judged by what is described as a hastily convened court. They were beaten severely with rods. They were hauled off to prison. No doubt they were very uncomfortable in the stocks. No doubt their backs ached from all of the strokes. Now all of this was an injustice. And why do we say this? It's because Paul and Silas were Roman citizens who deserved a proper trial.
Thank you. And the paragraph says how quickly things had happened without any warning. Now, Brother Robert Butler, what might have been on the mind of the Apostle Paul?
Well, Paul maybe was that night in prison reflecting on the people of the city of Philippi. Apparently there were not many Jews in the city. Acts 16 verse 13 says they went outside the city, and there they met some Jewish women. It appears the city didn't meet the requirements of having at least 10 Jewish men who could then form a synagogue. The people too were very proud of their Roman citizenship. Acts 16 verse 20. Paul and Silas are charged as being Jews, doing things that were unlawful, to quote, saying that we are Romans. So they soon would learn that Paul and Silas were also Roman citizens. And they falsely imprisoned them and then had them flogged as well.
Thank you very much. Let us now open our Bible to Acts 16. And let us try to find out why Paul may have found his imprisonment somehow confusing. Brother Alex Reinmiller, please.
Well, Paul may have been confused by his sudden change in circumstances. Our read scripture here in Acts 16, 8 through 10 says, "So they passed by Mysia and came down to Troas, and during the night a vision appeared to Paul. A Macedonian man was standing there urging him and saying, 'Step over into Macedonia and help us.' As soon as he had seen the vision, we tried to go into Macedonia, drawing the conclusion that God had summoned us to declare the good news to them." So they head straight to Philippi, the capital city of Macedonia, and initially they have wonderful results. But after just a few days, they're arrested and find themselves in prison. So Paul may have wondered, why did this happen? Why did God allow this?
Exactly. Thank you very much, Brother Reinmiller. Despite all of this, what attitude did the Apostle Paul display? Sister Sarah Reinmiller, please.
Paul didn't let this unexpected turn of events get him down for long. He didn't dwell on the bad or the scary. Instead, in verse 25, we find that Paul and Silas are praying and singing to Jehovah. No doubt these activities would have filled them with a sense of awe and joy. You can't be miserable when you're filled with awe and joy. So keeping this focus must have helped them to maintain a calm and confident attitude, full of faith in Jehovah.
Thank you very much. Fine. So, what is the application? Let us now try to apply this report to our situation. How could our situation be similar to that of Paul? Brother Chris Maver, please.
Well, like the Apostle Paul, we pray about our life and especially about our ministry, and we get answers. But like Paul, we experience what Ecclesiastes 9:11 says, time and unexpected events. And this may be confusing because these unexpected events could have a negative impact on our life. And we begin to wonder, did Jehovah really answer my prayers? Is he really directing my life and my service? Is he listening to me? So that's why it's so good to look at the Apostle Paul's life to understand how Jehovah deals with us and how we can balance this out.
Thank you, very nice application. How did Paul's situation change unexpectedly, Sister Susan Maver?
Well, there was a series of unexpected events. First, there was an earthquake, and that earthquake was no ordinary one because it loosened all their bonds, even removing those stocks from their legs. Then the prison doors were open too, so Paul didn't take advantage and leave, but rather used that opportunity to preach to the jailer. And he and his entire family, after a night of hearing about the truth, were all baptized. Another unexpected event. Then the civil magistrates, who the day before had ordered Paul and Silas flogged, personally came to escort them out of the city. But again, Paul didn't just leave. He went to encourage his brothers and tell them about all the miraculous events that had taken place that night.
Thank you, excellent. What an unexpected change of events. Jehovah can do the unexpected, and we do not need to be anxious in the face of trials. Now, the subheading, "It surpasses all understanding," is part of our theme scripture. Let us open together to Philippians chapter 4, and let's read together verses 6 and 7. Sister Lourdes Dellinger is so kind to read for us Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7.
Do not be anxious over anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, along with thanksgiving, let your petitions be made known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your mental powers by means of Christ Jesus.
Thank you very much. Now, what will we discuss now and review together, Brother Joel Dellinger?
First, we'll examine those words from Paul to the Philippians more closely in their real life context. Then we'll examine Bible accounts involving Hezekiah, Joseph, and Sarah, and see how Jehovah did the unexpected to protect his people. And then finally, the study will help all of us to see how we can successfully face any challenge, even during the Great Tribulation, without being consumed by worry.
Thank you very much. Now, let's start with the first part. What lesson did Paul highlight when he later wrote to the brothers in Philippi? Sister Sally Mans, please.
The lesson that Paul highlighted was that no matter how difficult a situation may appear to be, prayer and showing trust in Jehovah will bring a good result. The brothers in Philippi knew that Paul was speaking from experience. In the middle of the night, he and Silas had been in prison there with their feet locked in stocks. What could they do about it? They prayed and praised God, actions that they knew would, at the very least, give them happy hearts and peace of mind.
Wonderful, thank you. Very true. Now, what lesson can we learn from Paul's word? Brother Jim Mans, please.
We take courage from the experience of Paul and Silas because it assures us that Jehovah will give us the same peace when we face difficult problems. We may feel that we've come up against a stone wall with no way out. But as soon as we pour out our heart to Jehovah in prayer and stay focused on giving him praise, he gives us a peace that we never imagined possible. Or according to one translation, a peace that surpasses all our dreams. In time and in his own way, Jehovah will cause that stone wall to crumble, just as he promised in the words of 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, which reads, "So then, Jehovah knows how to rescue people of godly devotion out of trial, but to reserve unrighteous people to be destroyed on the day of judgment."
Thank you. What a good lesson for us. Now, the question to paragraphs 8 and 9, even though Paul had suffered an injustice in Philippi, what good resulted out of this? Sister Ketra Suranko will answer this question based on paragraph 8.
What Paul went through would have strengthened the brothers in Philippi. It also resulted in the defending and legally establishing of the good news, because the city magistrates would not dare persecute that new Christian congregation. Perhaps because of Paul's actions and his mentioning his Roman citizenship, it made it possible for Luke to stay after Paul and Silas left, so Luke could help the new Christians there in Philippi.
Thank you very much. Very nicely said. Now, why could the brothers in Philippi take Paul's word seriously? Brother Robert Siranko, please.
The brothers knew that Paul was not writing as a mere academic, that is, a person who has head knowledge but no practical experience in real life. He experienced extreme trials for the sake of Christ. In fact, when he wrote to the Philippians, he was under arrest in his house in Rome. Even so, he was continuing to enjoy the peace of God about which he wrote. So Paul was not just expressing some theoretical opinion of his, rather he was living exactly what he was describing in his letter.
Yeah, thank you. Now, we read in Philippians 4, verse 6, "Do not be anxious over anything." That's the subheading for the paragraphs 10 and 11. And we would like to ask the question, what do we need to do when we are overly worried about a problem? Brother William Mellonfund, please.
Just about everyone experiences anxiety, and some of us are just natural-born worriers. And so when we're worried and we don't have peace of mind, and what we need to do is take our worries to Jehovah, humbly. The read scripture is 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7. It encourages as follows: "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you in due time." And this is a key point. While you throw all your anxiety on him, and that's through prayer. And then we have this assurance, because he cares for you. So Jehovah often answers our prayers in ways that we could not possibly have imagined, above and beyond what we ask for. And we firmly believe also that the antidote to worry is prayer. And if we throw our burdens on Jehovah, then we can truly have peace of mind.
Wonderful, thank you. What an assurance for us. Now, what can we reasonably expect, Sister Sandra Mellonfund?
We can and must expect that Jehovah will answer our petitions. However, sometimes we have our own ideas of how they should be answered. And often Jehovah surprises us with the response that we receive. But no matter what the answer is, we can be sure that it will be exactly what we need, when we need it, and according to the circumstances. But while we are waiting for the answer from Jehovah, it is vital that we continue on in his service, doing our very best and giving Jehovah something to bless, remembering that he is never limited in how, when, or by what means he can respond.
Thank you very much. Wonderfully said. The paragraph says, sometimes he, Jehovah, surprises us by doing the unexpected. We are now moving into the second part of this article, as already indicated by Brother Joe Dellinger. We will look at examples of Jehovah doing the unexpected. Sister Abby Hyatt will now comment on the first example here in paragraph 12. What did King Hezekiah do when threatened by the Assyrian king Sennacherib?
Hezekiah prayed confidently to Jehovah with this good motive: so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are God, O Jehovah. He looked to Jehovah for guidance through his representative, the prophet Isaiah. He showed reasonableness by paying the fines Sennacherib imposed, and he took practical steps to prepare for a long siege, stopping up the waters of the springs and building up Jerusalem's wall and towers.
Thank you. Now, again, we want to have the application. What do we learn from how Jehovah resolved the problem? Brother Seth Hyatt, please.
Jehovah dispatched an angel that executed 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in one night. There is no way that Hezekiah could have foreseen that kind of a solution to his problem. The lesson for us is that Jehovah is not limited by the physical laws that limit us. So while he may choose to manipulate the physical forces, he may also choose to use some extraordinary means to answer a prayer that we couldn't anticipate.
Thank you, well said. What an encouraging example of Jehovah doing the unexpected. Let's look at the second example. What lesson do we learn from what happened to Joseph? Brother Kenneth Cook, please.
We learn that Jehovah's actions often exceed our expectations. In the illustration here on page 11, we see how a person may at first react to Jehovah's blessing. But any initial surprise quickly turns into deep gratitude. And we can be certain that this was true of Joseph. When he received that signet ring depicted here, he was appointed to the second highest position in Egypt. And as Genesis 50 verse 20 says, Joseph eventually helped to preserve many people alive.
Thank you. So we want to look at the third example. How did something unexpected occur in the case of Abraham's wife Sarah? Sister Jamie Cook, please.
Sarah had the unexpected and wonderful privilege of having a child when she was 90 years old. Before this, she likely accepted that Hagar might be the one who would bear the promised child for Abraham. In fact, Genesis 21, 6 and 7 says that Sarah laughed at the thought of becoming a first-time mother in her old age. It must have filled her heart with joy to see how Jehovah fulfilled his promise in a way that she never thought was possible.
Thank you. Now, while we do not expect that Jehovah, by means of miracles, takes away all our problems, what confidence can we have in Jehovah? Let us open together Isaiah chapter 43. And we would like to read along with Sister Katja Glockentin, Isaiah 43, verses 10 to 13.
You are my witnesses, declares Jehovah, yes, my servant whom I have chosen, so that you may know and have faith in me, and understand that I am the same one. Before me no God was formed, and after me there has been none. I am Jehovah, and besides me there is no Savior. I am the one who declared and saved and made known when there was no foreign God among you. So you are my witnesses, declares Jehovah, and I am God. Also, I am always the same one, and no one can snatch anything out of my hand. When I act, who can prevent it? It is our great God Jehovah who helped his servants in amazing ways. And Jehovah is Jehovah. He has not changed.
Thank you. So now, let's draw a conclusion out of it. What is the conclusion, Sister Faith Lucioni?
Well, this confidence that he has not changed assures us that he will empower us with what we need to accomplish his will. As expressed in 2 Corinthians 4, 7 to 9, Jehovah will give us the power beyond normal. If we give our all, he will provide the balance of what is required. And by remaining faithful to him, he will help us conquer what seems to be unconquerable.
Exactly. Thank you. Let us now, in paragraph 15, look at the third point of this article, the peace of God. What will help us to retain the peace of God, and how is this possible? Sister Kay van Zelm and Brother Hermanus van Zelm, please.
It is amazing
even to have the peace of God. Yes, we can have it and keep it. Why? Because it depends not on our circumstances, but on our good relationship with Jehovah. When we encounter upsetting problems beyond our control, we make specific petitions for God's direction, and then, nestled in our Father's loving arms, we wait patiently to see how He will work out the problem.
This peace of God is possible only by means of Christ Jesus, who offered His life as a ransom. Now that provision is a wonderful work of our Father. Why so? Well, consider this. After man became imperfect, our situation was hopeless. But then Jehovah transferred the life of Jesus from heaven to earth. What an unexpected solution. As a result, today our sins are covered, our conscience is clean, and we are close to Jehovah. Now that is indeed amazing.
Thank you very much. That's really encouraging. So now what will result when we attain the peace of God? Sister Liz Curzon and Brother Ron Curzon, please.
Well, Philippians chapter 4 and verse 7 in the Byington version says, "And God's peace beyond the highest reach of any mind will guard your hearts and thoughts." So when we're going through difficult times and we don't see a way out, or we can't even imagine how we're going to cope, Jehovah promises us that He knows what we need and that He'll guard our hearts and our mental powers. So Jehovah's really promising us that He's going to give us calmness in our thoughts and in our emotions.
And there in verse 7, the Apostle Paul used a military expression for the word guard. Now those living in Philippi could no doubt relate to that word, since that city was guarded by soldiers. And this gave them peace of mind, day and night, knowing that they had this protection. So if we are invaded by thoughts that are negative, or negative circumstances comes upon us, how reassuring it is to know that we have the peace of God that guards us, it protects us. And knowing that Jehovah loves us, He cares for us individually, and He promises to be there at our side to protect us, gives us peace of mind, both day and night.
Thank you very much. Now coming to paragraph 17, what will help us to face the future with full confidence? Sister Lydia Sinclair and Brother David Sinclair.
Well, reflecting on Jehovah's acts in behalf of His people throughout history, as we have today, really strengthens our faith and reminds us that our Jehovah today is the same Jehovah who acted miraculously in behalf of Paul, Hezekiah, Joseph, and Sarah.
He will do no less for us, so we can face the future with confidence.
And the theme of today's Watchtower lesson, Philippians 4:7, reminds us that the peace of God surpasses all understanding. So as worshipers of Jehovah, we can have the utmost confidence in Him, knowing from our study of the Bible, His Word, that He will accomplish His purposes in the future and guard our hearts just as He has done in the past.
Thank you. And sometimes He does it in an unexpected manner, as the paragraph says. Thank you very much. Now let's try to summarize in conclusion the article with 3 questions. What lessons do we learn from what happened to the Apostle Paul in Philippi? Sister Krista Schaefer and Brother David Schaefer.
We learned that even though we're following the leadings of Jehovah's Holy Spirit, we can encounter challenges. Without warning, Paul and Silas were dragged by a mob to stand before a court that threw them into prison, even though they were Roman citizens. So situations can change subtly, and perceived rights can be removed quickly. But this unjust imprisonment actually led to a great witness. Another thing we can learn is that Paul and Silas did not lose their joy when enduring hardships. While they sat in the innermost part of the prison with their feet in stocks, they prayed and sang praises to Jehovah. Their faith and joy was intact.
So we shouldn't allow our unfavorable circumstances to make us doubt Jehovah's concern for us. We can imitate the faith and joy of Paul and Silas, and we can experience peace
like they did. We can even seize opportunities in our circumstances to do good for others, to help them, like Paul helped the jailer and his family come into the truth. Moreover, Paul and Silas didn't allow the intensity of their situation to cause them to forget their new sister, Lydia. And later they used the whole experience to strengthen the faith of and encourage their brothers and sisters. So we too can bring praise to Jehovah despite our problems. And even though we may not see a way out of our current situation, Jehovah does. And Jehovah can do the unexpected.
Well said. What important lessons for us. Now, what scriptural examples prove that Jehovah can do the unexpected? Sister Benedra Turner and Brother William Turner, please.
At 2 Kings chapter 18, Hezekiah is faced with the threat of Jerusalem being captured by King Sennacherib of Assyria. So after praying to Jehovah, seeking advice from Isaiah, and trying to reach a compromise, Hezekiah prepares the people for a long siege. But then the unexpected happened. Jehovah sent an angel who destroyed 185,000 of Sennacherib's soldiers in one night. Not even Hezekiah expected that.
The book of Genesis gives us the example of Joseph. After being sold by his brothers and wrongly imprisoned, he could not have imagined how Jehovah would maneuver events where he would be appointed to a position of high authority and help preserve the lives of his family. Jehovah also exceeded the expectations of Joseph's great-grandmother, Sarah, by allowing her to give birth at the age of 90. So both examples show that nothing is too impossible for Jehovah as long as we remain faithful to him.
Thank you very much. How reassuring to have these examples. Thank you. Now, the third summary question is, how can we with full confidence retain the peace of God? Sister Jean Murray and Brother Saki Murray, please.
We have 3 reasons why we can be completely confident that nothing will take away the peace of God from us. First of all, without the ransom, it would be impossible to have peace with God, and Jehovah himself provides us with the ransom. And secondly, despite the fact that we're imperfect and full of flaws and mistakes, Jehovah gives us a clean conscience, and this gives us a lot of peace. And thirdly, Jehovah's love is constant, so we need never worry or fear that he's ever going to leave us or abandon us. Jehovah is always the same.
So why can we be confident? Because Jehovah himself protects us. We feel completely safe. And we know that there is no situation or circumstance that will be too much for Jehovah. We're also absolutely confident that he will protect us because we know him. We know who he is. We've had so many experiences in our life where we've seen his protection, and every time we've been left with this unspeakable peace that comes into our hearts. So that does not mean that we are blind to the circumstances around us, but it means that we have this quiet confidence in Jehovah that he will take care of matters, nothing is too big for him, and he knows us personally.
Thank you, and thank you all the participants in this summary of the Watchtower. What an encouraging article. We are determined to wait on Jehovah, and we will see how Jehovah does the unexpected in our behalf. We know that the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard our hearts.
What a wonderful summary of the Watchtower study, and thank you very much, Brother Glockentine, for taking us through that material. I'm sure you'll agree and appreciate the fact that we had an opportunity to see some of the helpers to the governing body, but perhaps more importantly, the helpers who are helping the helpers. And we're reassured by the fact that we have good, strong spiritual sisters helping the ones who are assisting the governing body. And we know these dear sisters just reflect all the wonderful sisters we have there that are helping their husbands to continue on faithfully. Well, at this point, we realize there are hundreds of thousands of our brothers and sisters who are tied in with us with this program. But we would also like to welcome another group of brothers and sisters. And those are the millions who will now start to watch the dedication program by means of JW Library and JW Broadcasting. So feel welcome and join us now in this wonderful program. Well, when we think of this matter of the dedication program, I'm sure you do appreciate that it's impossible for us to tell every story of every experience of how our brothers and sisters have seen Jehovah's hand help them either in their personal lives or in the actual construction work. In just a few moments' time, we're going to have an opportunity to see a specially prepared video that will tell us some of those stories. But this video is mainly designed to tell us about what happened with the construction here at Warwick. But before we start to watch the video, the governing body asked me to express appreciation on their behalf for a very special group of brothers and sisters. Who are we talking about? Well, those thousands of brothers and sisters who were working on all the other projects that were being either built or renovated at the same time as the Warwick project. So sometimes we focus on Warwick, but all these other brothers and sisters were likewise making similar sacrifices. And some of those projects were huge. For example, Wankel, over 1.1 million square feet of facilities were either built or renovated or remodeled at Wankel. And 302 residence rooms were added. This required 25,000 sheets of drywall to be hung and over 451,000 feet of electrical wire cables to be installed. Additionally, new office space was made for 240 people. Now, when they added up how many brothers and sisters actually helped with just the Wankel project, they came up with a figure of over 6,000 different individuals. Then the brothers at one stage started a Saturday work program that was designed to give extra help to the project. And the Bethelites, who have other assignments, who in their spare time offered to give this extra help on a Saturday, numbered 1,544, and they put in over 10,000 hours of work. Then we had 937 outside volunteers from 20 different states here in the United States who contributed some 18,000 hours. So a lot of work went into renovating and building there at Wankel. But what about the quality of the work there? Was it any less? No. In fact, the F residence and the Wankel office building received the highest award of 4 Green Globes from the Green Building Initiative. That's the GBI. That was back in 2015. Now, at that time, a project manager of GBI said, of the 23 buildings in the United States that have been certified with 4 Green Globes since 2006, the Watchtower Warwick office building achieved the highest point score with 94%. Now, of course, since 2015, other buildings have also received these 4 Green Globes. But remember also, among those buildings that have received it are all 7 buildings here at Warwick. Well, we could go on and on about Jehovah's blessings with regard to the Wankel project. But let's just take one example, the Wankel Chiller project that started in December of 2010. It was critical, the brothers tell us, to get the new chillers operational no later than the first week in the following July. But there was a problem because they wanted to make sure the presses would continue to operate. This is how one of the brothers expressed what happened. He said, by mid-June, and remember July, they had to have the chillers up and running, things started to get critical due to the lack of response from the specialist from the chiller fabricator. The purchasing department called repeatedly but were unable to get a commitment from the fabricator to meet our deadlines. So what did the brothers do? Well, they made it a matter of fervent and urgent prayer. What happened? The brother continues. A few days later, I received a phone call telling me that there was a man from the chiller fabricator waiting for me in the main lobby. He wanted to quickly see our startup schedule and our installations and then give us a list of things we needed to complete. We explained that everything was ready and we needed to begin the startup in 2 weeks. Well, he went for a visit. As he walked through the factories, he was amazed. He said he has never seen an installation in all the 20 years that he's been doing this that was ready to start on the first visit. Then, as he was continuing to be amazed, he said to the brother, "Let me know who your insulators are. I want to hire them." Well, the brother said very wisely, he didn't tell him until later that most of the work was done by sisters, many of whom had no experience at all. We didn't tell him that because we didn't want him to steal them away to other projects. The brother then goes on to say, eventually he got enough courage to ask him, well, what caused you to actually come to the lobby that day? Well, the man said he received an urgent trouble call from another customer in a nearby town. So he decided he'd just stop by Watchtower on the way. He then said the trouble call turned out to be a false alarm. Well, the chiller started on schedule and everything was operating according to plan. So that's just one of many. Now, believe me, they sent me reams of papers of experiences. And those that I didn't use, please forgive me. But over and over again, we see the brothers expressing how they appreciated the opportunity to work on the Wankel project as well as the other projects, and how they saw Jehovah's hand blessing them, as many of them sold homes, simplified their lives, or put their lives on hold so that they could be here with us. So to all those brothers and sisters who were working on all the peripheral projects, we want to say to you, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And now we have an opportunity to watch a video that's going to have an interview with the CPC. Who are the CPC? The Construction Project Committee, who organized the work here at Warwick.
Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 12 gives us a glimpse into the power and the breadth of Jehovah's hand. Remember, that's where it says that Jehovah holds all the water in the hollow of his hand. He can measure the universe with the span of his hand. And while this is figurative, it helps us to appreciate what Jehovah can accomplish to make sure his will takes place. Well, when we look at the beautiful Warwick project, we truly see that Jehovah's hand was involved in what took place there. Now, last year, you remember at the annual meeting, we had the interview of the 5 brothers who made up the construction project committee. And those brothers were the ones who oversaw and coordinated the work of that project. And they explained how the Warwick project took place. Well, this year at this special dedication program, we are again going to interview these dear brothers. And this time, they're going to tell us their experiences and experiences that they had that convinced them that Jehovah's hand was in this project.
Well, we've got some really touching experiences to relate about ones who really sacrificed in order to volunteer on the project and how their families supported them. They're really going to be beautiful.
And we also have some good experiences in regards to how the work was accomplished and seeing Jehovah's hand.
And lastly, we're going to see how Jehovah's hand was really shown even in non-believers and what they experienced and how the work was accomplished.
Let's get started with the aspect of how those who came to work on the project saw Jehovah's hand. And I think, Rich, you had an overarching comment that really convinced you of this.
Despite challenging weather and long commutes, difficult living situations, hard jobs, our brothers manifested the fruit of the Spirit. You could see that at work, and you knew Jehovah was working with them and motivating their work, and it really made the project something very special.
One couple had decided that with their circumstances and their finances that for a maximum they could come and work for 3 weeks on the project, which they did. But during the third week they were asked if they could possibly extend to a fourth week. So they prayed to Jehovah, please just give us joy, help us not have anxiety about this. Even though our finances will be at zero, we want to stay the fourth week. They did. Went on their way home back to the airport, and at the departure gate there was an announcement that the flight was overbooked. They were looking for volunteers to take a later flight, and in compensation the airline would give a very significant amount of cash. Well, they took the cash, no longer had their finances at zero. But that's not where they felt Jehovah's hand. They felt it that last week, the joy while they were working, and not having the anxiety over what the final outcome might be.
I'll never forget the night that Troy called in our room and said that one of our volunteers that were going to be arriving, they were fixing a tire alongside the road back at their home, and the brother's young wife was holding the flashlight, car veered off the road, hit her, killed her right in front of him.
Yeah, he'd already been invited and already scheduled to come. But when this happened, we didn't expect him to come. And we reassured him that it's okay to stay back and handle matters. But he was determined to come. What was amazing was to see how Jehovah helped him during that time. His overseers that were assigned to care for him and the department he worked with, they rallied to him. And in the end, he says he felt that this experience helped him to recover emotionally, spiritually, and he saw Jehovah's blessings in it. And it gave him pure evidence that Jehovah's promises will come true.
A brother came for a week, but his wife was back home with very serious health problems. The wife told her husband, "You must go. You must go. This is the way I can make a sacrifice to the project." So seeing Jehovah's hand on sisters like that and their self-sacrificing spirit, it made us feel like those sisters were right there working on the project.
As we got into the project, as it became evident that this project really was only going to get done as a result of Jehovah's Spirit, we saw our brothers transform themselves. They recognized that we were first and foremost spiritual men. We needed Jehovah's blessing, so before our meeting started, the brothers would get together and say a prayer. It was clear to everyone it was only going to be as a result of Jehovah's Spirit that this project was going to get done.
These overseers quickly became known not for their trade skills, but for being shepherds. They looked out for the brothers and sisters, they cared about them.
So as a committee, we assigned shepherding calls to ourselves, 3 to 4 a month, and along with other shepherding within our departments. But you would see these dear brothers and sisters come in at the end of the day for a shepherding call, dirt or grease from head to toe, cold, gloves on, ear warmers, huge smiles. You could just feel that Jehovah was just lifting us up and moving us along another day. It was quite an experience.
It was as if Jehovah was telling us spirituality is more important and each other than accomplishing the work. And that really helped us to see where our priorities should be.
We found that as long as we looked out for the friends spiritually, emotionally, as best we could, they did far and above anything we could have ever hoped for. It really was a wonderful example of how they responded to a spiritual atmosphere.
Troy, how about the local brothers and sisters? They had a good share too.
Yeah, the local brothers and sisters in the congregation surrounding the project were tremendous.
Quite a few would come in early in the morning to help guide the buses to their parking spots, to provide safe walkways to direct traffic and parking. And they would get up very early, freezing cold temperatures. They would work, have breakfast, and then they would have to go off to their secular work and taking care of their daily lives. It was really a good example of self-sacrifice. Another thing that they did, which was just outstanding, is we had up to 700 trips to the airport on a given weekend. Volunteers coming, volunteers going. And it was constant for years at a time. And yet, most of those airport runs were done by our local friends, even using their own vehicles.
Now, you brothers poured yourself out on the project. You personally saw Jehovah's hand helping you just when you needed it the most. Could you share a few of those?
I remember an instance where we were meeting with a governing body member on something else, but in the conversation, it just lent itself to the question, just what was it that made him or the rest of the governing body so convinced that this project was going to get done on time? And he explained, during the acquisition of the property, they had established terms in the acquisition that for them was a sort of a cold test, and Jehovah fulfilled the test exactly as they expected. And from that point on, he mentioned that he himself and every one of the members of the governing body to a man were firmly convinced that it was Jehovah's will to move from Brooklyn to Warwick. I needed to transmit that confidence to the brothers on the project as well.
We were getting ready to step off the bridge, so to speak, on some big decisions that we weren't going to be able to retract. Big dollars that were going to be spent for product that we weren't going to be able to send back. We needed more faith.
I can remember two instances in particular where I personally was discouraged, and you can kind of see it in our family, and both those times a governing body member showed up unscheduled and visited and made personal expressions to us, expressions to the family, and it was just what we needed to keep us going.
And now let's change thought a little bit. We also talked about how you saw Jehovah's hand and how the work was accomplished.
Jehovah caused our brothers to become not only good tradesmen, but world-class, expert tradesmen.
It was very common to see them take off their hard hats and say a group prayer. They realized it was a part of their worship, and it facilitated Jehovah's hand to be expressed through their work as well.
Didn't you notice, Rick, they felt a real need to have Jehovah's Spirit to be able to do what they needed to do. So they would look for an opportunity to pray before they tried to accomplish something.
That feeling that they really cared and it was part of their worship was even reflected in the prayerful attitude with which they went about the work.
We would often inform the family of a difficult challenge or problem that we were facing either as a committee or as a project. We would ask them to pray about it. And they would come back and tell us, I've been praying about this. And then we would hear their families back home were praying about it. And we would regularly get cards and letters from the field. Family worship projects, the kids would draw pictures and send them to us. And they put care packages, hundreds of them together. We even got cards and letters from all over the world. Japan, Australia, Europe. One sister from Europe sent about 65 pounds of Swiss chocolate for the family to enjoy.
And Rick, you remember our infamous Friday afternoon design, coordination, and construction meeting? Every time after prayer would start the same way. We don't have what we need, brothers, to work next week. We don't have sufficient enough drawings. Rick would be there working. He'd be back and forth emailing with other ones. He'd be getting stuff sent in. We would conclude that meeting at 5 o'clock on a Friday every time with, you know what? We have enough to work till next Friday. And there, poor Rick, there he'd go again the following Friday. We'd start back up again. But Jehovah would give us what we needed, as if he was telling us, don't worry, I've got this. I've got it under control. Just keep working.
You also mentioned some comments regarding the use of the construction groups and how that came about.
We had the most qualified people you could ever find there, ready to go to work. We simply didn't have enough of them. It was a matter of numbers. And so the committee charged a couple of us to look in and see what could we do to mobilize the nation in an organized way. All we had was a Saturday afternoon. And I thought, this isn't enough time. You can't organize this effort. We sat down at 1:30. By 3 p.m., what would become known as the Warwick construction group effort. Jehovah built it. He laid it out in front of us. How each building would be cared for. Yeah, did we adjust a few things as we went along? Absolutely. But that was the framework.
We divided the country up into 11 different areas. We appointed 3 brothers in each area that would kind of help identify the volunteers and bring them, reach out to the volunteers, tell them we need them, explain the work ahead of time.
And it was really an amazing arrangement. Of the 27,000 volunteers that we had on site, 21,000 were organized and sent to Warwick by these 11 construction groups. So they would do any initial training that they needed to do, get organized, so that they could come to Warwick and hit the ground running.
Do you remember when we had the challenge with pipe insulation? You remember how many miles of pipes do we have?
Hundreds of miles of pipes to insulate. That was a trade that really didn't exist among the Brotherhood in the United States, at least not nearly the number we would need. And so our construction group brothers said, well, how hard can it be? We'll put on training programs. And so 1 or 2, I think, came to Bethel, saw how it was done. The group started putting on training in the field at a Kingdom Hall or at a brother's home. And they trained about 2,000 volunteers how to do pipe insulation, mostly sisters. And they did all of that work, and they did a really professional job at it.
I think that also speaks to how the role the sisters played on our project. The ones that were assigned there, the ones in the field that were coming in, they played a tremendous role. We saw Jehovah's Spirit on them in helping us resolve problems and accomplishing the work and so forth.
So with our training programs and orientation, the brothers quickly understood that safety and spirituality is a personal expression between them and Jehovah first.
Safety is a spiritual value. It's something that we owe our brothers and sisters, we owe our families, we owe to Jehovah, who's the source of life.
We had many non-believers involved in this project. How did they even get to see Jehovah's hand in this?
We were meeting with different officials on a particular aspect of the project, and we had a bit of a difference of opinion as to what would be needed, but we really were not able to reach an agreement with the officials. At that point, we realized taking the secular, technical approach wasn't going to work. We pushed the plans aside, said a silent prayer, and then just asked the officials, what can we do to address your concerns? What would you like to see us do? That changed the tone of the discussion. It changed from a technical-based discussion to more, we're here to work together as neighbors, to come to a common accord. And we eventually worked out a compromise that met their concerns. A few weeks later, we were back in front of the same officials, but on a totally different subject. But before we could even present what we were there to talk about, they stopped us and they just wanted to commend us for how good the last meeting we had went. We were looking at each other because we didn't think it went that well. But they pointed out how they felt that they were dignified and they really appreciated the way we worked with them. And so it became clear to us that this project wasn't entirely about technical issues, but really about manifesting Jehovah's hand through the fruitage of the Spirit as we even dealt with the officials.
We had our fuel truck that was in the local shop getting repaired. And a fuel truck is critical for our project because at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, our brothers are out there to fuel the equipment so we can get the work done that day. They called it to go pick it up, and the gentleman told them, sorry, we're closed. What project are you on? He says, we're with the Warwick project here with Jehovah's Witnesses at Watchtower. He goes, oh, Watchtower? Oh, no problem. I'm going to leave the gate open. I'm going to show you where the keys are. I'll have it there for you, and you can take the vehicle. He says, I trust you people.
One of the bus drivers, he showed up late one morning, and then he explained why he was late. He had been assigned the wrong bus that morning, and his dispatcher made him come back and switch buses. He says, I was so mad at him, I told him, these people are working for God. They're not getting paid. They have to get to work on time. They have to do this work. He then told the friends, he says, I know I'm going to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses one day. I'm going to serve my God, Jehovah. And then he sat down and he drove the friends to work.
A brother was out in the ministry, and he knocks on the gentleman's door. The gentleman comes over, he starts his presentation and interrupts him and says, have you been to Warwick? And the brother steps back and says, well, no one's allowed at Warwick. It's under construction. He goes, no, I've been there. I worked there, and it was very clean, organized, and the people were the most friendliest people I've ever seen. It was the best experience of my life to work on that project.
one of the jobs that was to pull in this main feeder, this main electrical line into the complex. Very technical piece. And so we had that scheduled for December 24th. And there was a little bit of an aversion on the part of the contractors that wanted to be able to monitor when this was going in. And we said, no, I'm sorry, this is the date we need to do this. We're on a day-to-day schedule we need to accomplish. Well, who's going to do it? Well, as you know, we use women a lot on this site, and this is a crew of sisters. Well, I can't believe that. That's a heavy line, and that can't be striking the ground. It's fragile until it gets into the conduit. He said, well, I wasn't working tomorrow. I'm going to call my wife, and I'm going to come in tomorrow anyway. Sure enough, he came in, spent a couple hours there. Our sisters, as usual, did phenomenal work, pulled the line in, got it done.
Do you remember how long it took them to do the work?
2 hours. They had pulled in 2 hours. Yeah, it was just phenomenal. He just shook his head and went home.
We hired the largest contractor in that part of New York State to perform a significant amount of work on site. And toward the end of the project, the head of that company told us, he said, when you first came to us and you described what you were going to build and the size of it, and then you told us the schedule that you were hoping to meet, and then you told us you were going to do it with volunteers. He said, when we were happy to take your money, but when you left, we were literally laughing at you. We knew there was no way you could ever do this much construction in that short of a time, let alone with volunteers, and that this was going to be a disaster. We're not laughing anymore. So they could see Jehovah's hand on that project.
Well, we thank all of you for those very, very encouraging experiences. It makes us think of Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 1, which reminds us that Jehovah's hand is not too short to accomplish his will, and this is truly evident on this project. And I know you brothers would, as well as all of us, to thank all who had a share in this, all those who physically came here to volunteer, the local brothers and sisters who supported all from home, and everybody with their prayers. We truly appreciate that. And we'd also like to thank you, 5 brothers, and the sacrifices that you and your wives made during this project. And another evidence for me that Jehovah's hand was in this project is you 5 brothers are all friends. And just interacting with one another and being with you, you can see that that's evidence of Jehovah's Spirit. But ultimately, our thanks goes to Jehovah for what took place, because we know he ultimately was behind the success of this project. And we're very thankful that all of us had a chance to witness Jehovah's hand in action in what took place.
Well, that certainly was a beautiful experience, wasn't it? And for those of us that are visiting here, if you meet someone who worked on the project, make sure to ask them, how did you see Jehovah's hand in helping you personally and in the project? And you may be surprised at what stories you learn by asking that question. Well, at this point, what we're going to do is something a little different, an interactive exam or test to see who qualifies to remain in the auditorium for the... Now, what we'd like you to do is, first of all, you have to answer the question, how many facilities are being dedicated today? Then list them in alphabetical order. Well, you know we're not going to do that to you. But that little worry you felt will be allayed when you watch the next video, which tells you about the facilities that are going to be dedicated.
To support the kingdom work, expansion has recently been underway within the United States. This involves the construction of the New World headquarters at Warwick, along with 15 other buildings being dedicated at the 2017 annual meeting. Let's visit each site and see how these buildings affect us in our kingdom service and ultimately bring praise to Jehovah. Videos have become an important tool in our worship, and so the need to produce them faster and in greater quantity has risen dramatically. 5 years ago, the department produced 1 feature film each year, along with a handful of smaller videos. During 2016, that number grew to more than 350 productions. The existing facilities in Patterson consisted of 3 smaller studios. To produce more content simultaneously, a larger production space with multiple stages was needed. In early 2015, on Mount Ebo Road, a large building less than 5 miles away from Patterson was acquired. Originally built as a pharmaceutical warehouse, the building had more than 70,000 square feet of open space. Work began to convert the warehouse into 1 large sound stage and 2 smaller stages. Renovations were completed in December 2016.
The request for videos is certainly not slowing down. It's increasing. So we have scheduled for 2017 around 420 videos that will be used for various aspects of the organization. So we have seen the need to have increased personnel, increased facilities to accommodate all these requests. So we can see that Jehovah has raised up brothers and sisters, or gifts and men and women, that have been able to help produce the beautiful music we have, the videos that are touching minds and hearts.
Just 1 mile away from Mount Ebo, a 12,000 square foot building was purchased and converted into a carpentry shop for building props and sets. The Mountain View apartments were also purchased and renovated, providing housing for 100 Bethel family members. From the oversight of congregations and meeting arrangements to territory assignments and other aspects of the preaching work, kingdom activities are overseen by the branch committee with direction provided by the service department. In the United States branch, there was a need for expanded facilities to house these departments at Wankel.
The work for the Wankel expansion project was basically completed in November of 2015. It involved new construction for residence buildings, the new F garage, and the new office building. So between the new and the renovated facilities, it was over 1,118,000 square feet.
You had to remember too, at the same time, all the departments are still running. You know, meanwhile, all these buildings are going up around us. I'm sure it didn't appear this way to the workers, but to us, it was like it was on a high-speed video at the rate that it went up. It was incredible.
It wasn't just their skills and expertise that they brought. It was their zeal, it was their joy, it was their positive attitude that they were able to maintain even despite the heavy workload. And that engenders appreciation and zeal among all of those who come in contact with them.
Many are taking advantage of tools such as JW Library and the JW Language app to read, study, and teach the Bible. The increased use of technologies like these has created the need for more computer engineers and other personnel to design, develop, and test this software. Workspace and housing for these volunteers is now being provided at the Rivercrest apartment complex in Fishkill. Another important concern of the United States branch involves caring for senior members of the Bethel family. To meet that need, work was completed in 2016 on Congregate North and South.
Congregate living is really home care. Home care for the most precious ones among our Bethel family.
We're surrounded by many wonderful brothers and sisters who are very hardworking and care so much about us. And this has touched my heart.
Blessings are being able to be with friends that we've known for years. It's like a reunion that doesn't stop. Jehovah's really taking good care of all of them.
The care that our dear older ones receive is outstanding. And it's true that we have people who care, but there's a reason. It reflects Jehovah's view of older ones. He says in Isaiah 46:4, "Until you grow old, I will carry you." And that's how those who've been trained by Jehovah treats the older ones. So it's really a loving atmosphere that they're in.
To receive and store building materials, A 220,000 square foot warehouse was purchased in 2014 in Montgomery, New York. At the Montgomery warehouse, materials were staged and residential bathrooms for Warwick were prefabricated, speeding up construction on site. The warehouse continues to be used as a storage facility for both the U.S. branch and the world headquarters. In 2014, 2 hotels were purchased, Newburgh Center A and Newburgh Center B. Being centrally located between all 3 sites, these hotels have been ideal for housing temporary workers and hosting guests visiting the Bethel facilities.
These hotels were a great help for the workers. They were going to be now closer to the project. Before, with that long commute from Brooklyn on the bus, that was tiring by the time they got to work. But now they were closer so they could get a little more rest in the evenings and the mornings and be more productive. These workers are lovable. You have to love them. You think about all the sacrifices. They left homes, old homes, left jobs, businesses, a family, friends, their pets. You thank them, but they thank you. They thank you for the privilege of coming, even though they're the ones that made so many sacrifices. So they're an encouragement to the rest of us.
The plan to relocate the world headquarters to Warwick goes back more than 8 years when we first purchased this 253-acre property, 50 miles northwest of Brooklyn.
Some of the reasons that Brooklyn was so advantageous no longer are such a key role for us. And then just the fact of living in a city that continues to get bigger and bigger, it created more and more complications, more costs. But I often think, even so, the real reason we moved out of Brooklyn is what the governing body has said from the beginning, that they are convinced Jehovah's Spirit directed them to move out of Brooklyn and to come up here to Warwick, New York. And we're looking forward. At some point in time, we're going to look back and we're going to say, what are all the other reasons why Jehovah directed that to take place?
The Warwick property included a number of abandoned buildings that needed to be demolished and removed. Once the site was cleared and plans were approved, construction began on July 29, 2013, and moved at a remarkable pace.
About 4,000 a day were coming to the site. Over 27,000 of our brothers and sisters worked here. Then you had everybody in Bethel, from the governing body all the way down to departments. Everybody was united in making this project a success. And there were challenges, but they would be settled in peace and love and all the qualities of Jehovah's Spirit. That is a modern day miracle, especially when you think about the world we're living in that is so fragmented and lack of unity. And so you look at that, it just makes you so proud to be part of this organization.
I remember the first time visiting Warwick after completion. I call it a happy, sad moment. Happy because now the buildings were going to be used for the intended purpose, but sad because you didn't see the high-vis vests anymore. It was a beautiful scene with all those colorful vests, and now you didn't see them, so it was sad. You get choked up. You realize that behind every vest, it was a beautiful kingdom story, and you missed them.
The environment here at Warwick is just beautiful. It's quiet, it's refreshing.
And it makes me really appreciate Jehovah's creation around us. It's beautiful to be here, and I thank Jehovah for the privilege.
Warwick is a complex of 8 buildings, more than 1.5 million square feet of construction. Bethel housing is provided in 4 residence buildings with 569 rooms, along with another residence in nearby Sterling Forest with another 21 rooms. And just a short distance away is the Tuxedo facility. Computer department engineering and the broadcasting studio are located here, where the monthly broadcast is produced and now made available in over 130 languages. The Office Services Building primarily serves as the hub for most World Headquarters functions. The building also includes 3 exhibits where visitors can take self-guided tours. The Bible and the Divine Name, which features rare Bibles and highlights how God's name has been preserved in the Scriptures. The exhibit, A People for Jehovah's Name, a visual history of Jehovah's Witnesses, and World Headquarters Faith in Action, which explains how witnesses are organized to study, teach, and live by what we learn in the Bible.
You travel anywhere in the United States branch or internationally for that matter, and there's someone who has worked on Warwick. And the feeling that you get is Warwick is not the world headquarters, it's our world headquarters.
I've heard a number say when they go back home, they're never going to be the same. Some have simplified, so they've moved from a big house to an apartment. Others have started pioneering, so that's what they're going to do. It's really been a witness to the witnesses.
Jehovah looks for opportunity to bless his people. That makes him happy. And you turn it around now and you look at all the work that's gone into this. When he sees all those who volunteered to come on the project, all of our brothers and sisters around the world who made donations, those who included it in their prayers, those who helped others to come, how proud that must make Jehovah. And he's just looking to bless them for that.
I sometimes try to imagine the conversations in heaven between the angels and the kings in heaven, and how they're so proud of all these workers down here. And no doubt many of them were involved in the project. We think of the workers here on earth, but how about the workers in heaven? They may have been involved in more than a few times with safety issues, with legal matters. So Jehovah was proud of everyone, his universal family, both in heaven and on earth, with these projects.
I feel it's going to build up the spirituality of our brothers and sisters as they come. And as we know, they're coming from all over the world. And that's only going to further advance the work.
These buildings are beautiful, and it's a beautiful setting that brings praise to Jehovah. But what will bring the greatest praise is how these buildings, these tools will be used to honor his name, to bring attention to his kingdom, to spearhead the preaching work. What these buildings will help the governing body accomplish will bring the greatest praise to Jehovah.
So now we will be passing out those tests. And now is the time for an interactive part of our program where we have an opportunity to raise our voices in praise to Jehovah. So if you'd like to stand, if you're able, we're going to sing our new dedication song at this time. And remember, that's entitled, A Place That Will Bring You Praise.
Serve your purpose. There's work something yet to be done, to pick up the pace and carry on in the work given by your Son. So we offer the best of our time and possessions. You alone are deserving, giver of all good things. For all you have done, we are grateful. Our voices in song we now raise, for you made our home reality. Bring this place that will bring you praise.
What a beautiful song, sung beautifully. If you'd like to take your seats. We've now arrived at the time, a highlight of our program, the dedication talk. And this is going to be given to us by the longest serving member of the current governing body, Brother Gerrit Losch. And the title of his talk, Expansion That Glorifies Jehovah.
Modern-day worship of Jehovah began in a small way. It calls to mind the scripture that says, according to Zechariah 4:10, "Who has despised the day of small beginnings?" What is the context of the scripture? In the year 537 before our common era, Jehovah moved Persian King Cyrus, who had conquered Babylon, to release the Israelites that were held captive there for 70 years, opening the way for them to return to Jerusalem and Judah. They were to restore true worship and rebuild the temple that Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed. How many exiles returned to Jerusalem from Babylon in 537 BCE? According to Ezra 4:1, about 50,000. A footnote in the 6th edition of Isaac Leeser's Bible translation suggests that including women and children, the number amounted to about 200,000. In the 7th month of the year 537, the altar was set up, and in the following year, 536, the foundation of the new temple was laid. But after laying the foundation, they neglected to rebuild the temple on that foundation. Enemies round about also discouraged them from doing so. The enemies succeeded to place a ban on the work about 15 years later, in 522 before our Common Era. 2 years after that, in 520, stirred up by the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, Governor Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest courageously resumed the construction of the temple despite the ban. Jehovah proclaimed that the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his own hands will finish it. For who has despised the day of small beginnings? Zechariah 4:9 and 10. The rebuilding of Jehovah's temple at Jerusalem had a modest beginning, yes, but it was not to be despised. After all, it involved true worship, pure worship of Jehovah. 520 BCE saw this day of small beginnings, but in 515 BCE, 22 years after the return from Babylon and 5 years after the construction project was resumed, the temple was completed. The former exiles held the inauguration, or we could say dedication, of this house with joy, Ezra 6:13 through 16. And this resulted in Jehovah's praise. He was glorified by the rebuilt temple. There were also small beginnings for the Christian congregation at Pentecost 33 of our Common Era. And Jesus related this illustration in Matthew chapter 13, verses 31 and 32. The kingdom of the heavens is like a mustard grain that a man took and planted in his field. It is, in fact, the tiniest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it's the largest of the vegetable plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of heaven come and find lodging among its branches. What's the meaning of Jesus' illustration of the mustard grain? The grain itself represents the kingdom message, as well as what results from the preaching of that message, the Christian congregation. Like the mustard grain, that is the tiniest of all the seeds, the Christian congregation had small beginnings in 33 of our common era. However, within a few decades, the congregation grew rapidly. It expanded beyond all expectations. Jesus tells us that the birds of heaven were able to find lodging among its branches. These figurative birds picture right-hearted individuals who find spiritual food, shade, and shelter within the Christian congregation. There were also small beginnings in modern times. Consider our first headquarters. In modern times, Bible students, as we were called, had headquarters offices first at 101 Fifth Avenue in Pittsburgh, and thereafter at 44 Federal Street, Allegheny, Pennsylvania. By the late 1880s, they built their own structure. Completed in 1889 at Arch Street, it was known as the Bible House. Due to continued expansion, headquarters was transferred to Brooklyn, New York in the years 1908, 1909. In 1908, the old Plymouth Bethel, 13th through 7th and 6th Street, Brooklyn, was purchased. It belonged to the Plymouth Congregational Church. Also, 124 Columbia Heights, close by, was purchased from the Plymouth Church. It soon became the new home of our headquarters staff of, at that time, 30 persons. And they called it Bethel, meaning House of God. Bethel was the name the Plymouth Church had given to their building in Hicks Street. The remodeled Hicks Street building then became known as the Brooklyn Tabernacle. It housed offices and an auditorium. On January 31, 1909, 350 persons were present for the dedication of the new headquarters. But there were also small beginnings in a different sense. In 1919 of our common era, the statement in Zechariah 4:10 about small beginnings applied after the Israelites had returned from Babylon. Was there a parallel in modern times? Yes. In our century, for Jehovah's anointed Christians, it was a day of small beginnings in 1919 when they were completely free from domination by Babylon the Great, the world conglomerate of false religion, in order to restore true worship. Already in the years before, they had progressively cleansed themselves from Babylon the Great. From 1914 to 1919, the brothers lived through a number of crises and tests. But this came to an end in 1919. The memorial of Christ's death was celebrated on Sunday, April 13, 1919, with 17,961 attending in many lands. This was, of course, a lot less than the number of returnees from literal Babylon. And of these 18,000, about 4,000 also reported field service. Many looked down on the brothers. Yes, there were again small beginnings, but still they were approved by Jehovah, and therefore he caused expansion ever since. There's expansion in the material sense. In order to meet together in worship, last year about 1,000 properties were purchased and new kingdom halls were constructed on it. In addition, there were many more where major or minor renovations were done. Branch offices are being expanded or newly built, remote translation offices, Bible schools, facilities, and assembly halls. In the United States, we have now 47
active assembly halls. Also, there is expansion in numbers. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, there were almost 1.2 million who attended the memorial this year. In Mexico, without Central America, there were about 2.2 million who attended. Worldwide, about 20 million attended the memorial of Christ's death last year. Each weekend, an average of 5,300 new ones are getting baptized and becoming our brothers and sisters. Our worldwide family and brotherhood grows. But our numerical expansion in itself is not proof that we have the truth. Other religions have many more members and some grow quickly. There are about 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, second only to the number of named Christians. But numbers alone prove nothing. Truth is not measured in numbers, but the combination of true teaching, true love, high moral standard, neutrality, caring and sanctifying God's holy name, together with the increase, that does prove beyond doubt that Jehovah has chosen us as his people. In Isaiah chapter 60, verse 22, there's this prophecy that was foretold, and it says, "The little one will become 1,000, and the small one a mighty nation. I myself, Jehovah, will speed it up in its own time." Who is that mighty nation? It's the great crowd and the anointed together. They constitute a combined mighty nation. Although they are relatively few when compared to the present total world population of more than 7.5 billion as of March this year. Many who visit us at Warwick, Wankel, or Patterson say, "Oh, you live here like in paradise." And those saying this may have in mind the loving fellowship that we enjoy, and also the beautiful surroundings. And the fact is that we do live in a paradise, a spiritual paradise. But what about you visitors and all those who are watching this program by streaming and otherwise? The good news is you are also in the spiritual paradise. All our worldwide brotherhood lives in this spiritual paradise. Now, what is the spiritual paradise? It involves our relationship with Jehovah. It involves the spiritual food that we enjoy, served by the faithful slave. It also involves the loving relationship with our brothers in the congregation and our worldwide brotherhood. It includes personal blessings from Jehovah that he bestows upon us in everyday life. The spiritual paradise is the secure, spiritually prosperous environment or realm of activity in which we worship Jehovah. No matter where we live on earth, we are in this paradise as long as we actively support the worship of Jehovah and endeavor to display the new personality. The spiritual paradise began in a limited way in 33 of our common era at Pentecost. It underwent changes during the centuries but was restored in 1919. The spiritual paradise relates to the divine approval of the anointed that became evident that year, 1919. In comparison with the first century, the anointed enjoyed increased spiritual prosperity since that time. And since the 1930s, those with an earthly hope also entered the spiritual paradise. And ultimately, the spiritual paradise will be in full existence and perfection in the new world. Do we appreciate that spiritual paradise? Satan will try to destroy our spiritual paradise. He thinks he can succeed because we seem vulnerable. He may try to disrupt the flow of spiritual food, or break up our unity, or stop us from zealously preaching all elements of the spiritual paradise. Through political governments, he will try to efface true worshippers and true worship from the earth. But he will not succeed. He will be thrown into an abyss for 1,000 years, and after that he will be crushed out of existence. What about the governments that he controls now? They will already be crushed in Armageddon forever. The Messianic kingdom will take control of the earth, that eventually will become a perfect literal paradise, and then the spiritual paradise and the physical paradise will exist concurrently. The expansion of the spiritual paradise since 1919 was paralleled by material expansion. Let me take you back on history lane. First, let's talk about our printing efforts. 1920, we started with a rotary press at Myrtle Avenue, New York. 1922, the printery was relocated to 18 Concord Street. From 1927 to 1986, additional printery buildings were bought and erected on Adams Street. But what about residence and office expansion? On October 10, 1960, there was a dedication of a new residence and office building at 107 Columbia Heights. 630 brothers attended in the ground floor Kingdom Hall. The new building, Brother France said, reminds us of the psalmist's words that everyone in Jehovah's temple would speak his glory. 1969, the 119 Columbia Heights residence was built and dedicated on May 2. In the same year, a complex was bought from Squibb and Sons Pharmaceutical, and it served as world headquarters until we moved here to Warwick. The address was 2530 Columbia Heights, and it was dedicated on March 15, 1982. Later, buildings number 48 and 50 were also joined to the number 30 building. Close by is the 85 J Street lot, a whole city block that was used for parking. Then, September 18, 1995, there was another important dedication program. 17 residences had been added since the previous dedication of the Bethel residence on May 2, 1969. Among the added residences, there was the Towers Hotel that we bought 1975, the Bossett Hotel, Standish Hotel, Sliver Building, the 108 Jora Lemon Building, the 30-story Sand Street Building, and the 97 Columbia Heights Building. Formerly, there was the Margaret Hotel on the property. The 360 Furman Street building, which housed our shipping department and some other departments, was purchased by us on March 15, 1983, and totally renovated. It had 1 million square feet of floor space. As of this date, most of our properties, almost all of them, have been already sold, and this more than covered the expenses needed to build headquarters here. Excuse me. Well, what about expansion at Wankel? In 1963, the farm at Wankel was purchased from brothers 75 miles or 120 kilometers away from New York. New residence buildings were completed in 1968, 71, and 73. A large printery was eventually built 73 and expanded 1975. In 2004, printing in New York was discontinued and all printing was consolidated at Wankel. On May 15, 2005, there was the dedication program for the expanded Wankel complex and facilities. Today we also dedicate a new residence, new parking garage, and new office building at Wankel, as well as the Montgomery warehouse and 2 nearby hotels and diners that you have seen before in the video. Wankel has become the national headquarters for the United States branch, and most of the branch committee members live at Wankel. Warwick is the worldwide headquarters, so that's the difference. But there was also a complex built at Patterson in the mid-1990s with offices, residences, and theocratic schools. And on May 17 and the following days, 1999, was the dedication program. Recently, the Mount Evo video studios on Route 22, close to Patterson, were added, and another building. Now, Patterson is also considered as part of world headquarters. Also, the Tuxedo building that we bought from the paper company, where our broadcasting studio is now, is part of world headquarters. It's situated just about 10 minutes from here on the same country road. Finally, we also dedicate the Rivercrest, a complex that was bought at Fishkill, where several hundred Bethelites live. Today we will focus on the dedication of our beautiful world headquarters complex at Warwick. Now, why was it built here? Well, we trust that it was Jehovah that wanted us to build it here. Well, what we learn from ancient times is that, according to 2 Kings 23:27, that Jehovah was the one who chose Jerusalem as a center of worship. And in our time, our world headquarters is a center that promotes true worship worldwide, and we believe it was chosen by Jehovah. All the expansion that we talked about glorifies Jehovah. The Apostle Paul had the right attitude. He wrote in 1 Thessalonians 2:6, "Nor have we been seeking glory from men." Yes, we seek Jehovah's glory, not our own glory. He is the one that caused and blessed the construction of our complexes. I'm sure you agree. Jehovah is the one who blessed the rebuilding of the physical temple in the times of Zerubbabel. And Jehovah said back then, according to Isaiah 60, verse 7, "I will beautify my glorious house." Now, the prophecy about the glorious house in our time refers not to the literal structures of world headquarters, but to our spiritual temple. Many would come, according to prophecy, and worship in that spiritual temple. It is a figurative house of prayer for all the nations, according to Isaiah 56, verse 7. Revelation 7:9 prophesies about a great crowd out of all the nations. Now, what is their role and position? Well, let's look at it in the Bible, in Revelation chapter 7. In verse 9, it says, "After this I saw, and look, a great crowd, which no man was able to number, out of all nations and tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes, and there were palm branches in their hands." It says that they stand before the throne of God. Does this mean that they go to heaven? No. The earth is called God's footstool. Isaiah 66, verse 1. So even on earth, the great crowd stands before the throne of Jehovah. The great crowd consists of Christians with the hope to live forever in paradise on earth. Revelation 7:15 says about them, "They're rendering him sacred service day and night." Where? In front of the temple? No, it says in his temple. Where exactly is the great crowd serving? Yes, all of us, no matter what hope we have, serve Jehovah in the spiritual temple, because we all worship Jehovah based on Jesus' sacrifice. So what is the spiritual temple? True or false? It's the same as a spiritual paradise. False. It refers to anointed Christians. False again. The temples in Bible times constituted a provision or arrangement of worshiping Jehovah. So the spiritual temple is also an arrangement of worship based on Jesus' perfect ransom sacrifice. And all that worship Jehovah based on his sacrifice are in the spiritual temple. Now, the spiritual paradise, on the other hand, refers to a condition that allows us to serve Jehovah with his approval and in peace with our brothers. We can enhance the beauty of the spiritual paradise and extend its borders by making disciples and also by displaying the Christian personality. All in the spiritual paradise sing Jehovah's praise without let-up. It is as if they preach day and night. Isaiah 62:6 goes on to say, continuously, all day long and all night long, they should not be silent. You who make mention of Jehovah, do not rest. Yes, we are determined not to be silent, not to rest, mentioning Jehovah. In chapter 60, verse 6 in Isaiah, we read, they will proclaim the praises of Jehovah. By preaching the good news and our expressions in kingdom halls, we all contribute to Jehovah's praise. Praising Jehovah is one of the primary objectives of our meeting attendance and our preaching activity. We understand that we do not primarily preach to save people's lives. Jehovah's praise is more important than the salvation of people. Why? Because Jehovah is more important than people. In Hebrews 13, verse 15, it says, through him, Christ, let us always offer to God a sacrifice of praise, that is the fruit of our lips that make public declaration to his name. Nobody can stop the expansion. Even dictatorial governments, including communist governments, could not stop the expansion of God's organization. Hitler could not, Stalin could not, Trujillo in the Dominican Republic could not, Mussolini in Italy could not, Ceausescu of Romania could not, Mao Zedong could not, and the Hoxha, dictator of communist Albania, could not. Nobody can, because Jehovah is with us. What about the former Soviet Union that included Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, and Russia? In 1991, there were less than 50,000 publishers in the former Soviet Union. Now they're approaching 400,000 publishers. Imagine that increase or expansion. Within the period of 1991 to 1998, a total of 220,492 were baptized in the former Soviet Union. In 1990, in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, there was just one congregation. Now there are about 75. 1993 saw the largest baptism of true Christians ever. It happened also in Kiev, Ukraine, at the convention. 7,402 were baptized. Restrictions cannot stop the work. Jehovah promised, I will oppose those who oppose you, and I will save my own sons. Isaiah 49, 24, 25. Shortly before Armageddon, prophecy shows we will be attacked by a coalition of nations or governments directed by Satan and the demons. We do not need to fear, though. Jehovah will protect his people during the Great Tribulation, and it stands to reason that he will also protect the physical headquarters. In Zechariah 2:8 he says, whoever touches you touches the pupil of my eye. Zechariah 2:5. And I will become to her, declares Jehovah, a wall of fire all around in protection. And I will become the glory in her midst. Yes, our headquarters bring glory to Jehovah. These headquarters, facilities, and related buildings were built to glorify and praise Jehovah. Isaiah 43, verse 21 says, "The people whom I formed for myself," what for? "So that they might declare my praise." Isaiah 43:21. Good to remember that text. This shows that the purpose why Jehovah has formed us as his people is to glorify and praise him. And so what is the purpose of the Christian congregation in general? Well, again, to bring praise to Jehovah. What's the purpose of Warwick headquarters? To praise Jehovah. Ephesians 1:12 encourages us to serve for the praise of his glory. May this new complex and the other buildings that we dedicate today glorify and praise our dear Heavenly Father, Jehovah. It is appropriate now that we say a dedication prayer to dedicate all buildings that have not been dedicated yet. And Brother Leon Beaver, who serves on the branch committee in the United States, will now represent us in prayer. With this prayer and your consent, I now declare all our new buildings as dedicated to Jehovah. And we thank all of you for your contributions in various ways, manual labor, financial contributions, and prayers. Now, what is the opposite of the day of small beginnings? The day of a big finish? Well, is the dedication of our headquarters the big finish or ending? No ending is in sight. It is all relative. In the New World, we might even consider the dedication of Warwick as a small beginning, in comparison with the huge work that will be accomplished in paradise to teach billions, because billions will be resurrected. Isaiah 11:9 says, "The earth will certainly be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah as the waters cover the sea." Yes, we have a glorious God, and Jehovah has a glorious name. We have a glorious good news, and we have a glorious hope for the future. When Solomon inaugurated the temple, the glory of Jehovah filled the house. Today, the spiritual temple, in which millions of us find themselves in, is also filled with Jehovah's glory. In Isaiah 26, verse 12, it says, "O Jehovah, you will grant us peace, because everything we have done, you have accomplished for us." Yeah, we want to give credit and praise to Jehovah God. Even opposers come to realize that Jehovah's blessing was involved in the construction, as was the case in the days of Nehemiah. Nehemiah 6:16 says, "They realized, the opposers, that it was with our God's help that this work had been done." And this is in line with 1 Peter 4:11, "So that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. The glory and the might are his forever and ever. Amen." Revelation 5:13 agrees with this, saying, "To the one sitting on the throne and to the Lamb be the blessing and the honor and the glory and the might forever and ever." Hallelujah.
Thank you very much, Brother Lush, for helping us to focus on the real meaning of the dedication of these facilities. But now it's appropriate that we stand and sing another song together, and at the conclusion of the song, if you're able to, we'd like you to remain standing so we can give you some greetings from overseas. The song that's been selected is song number 92, A Place Bearing Your Name, song 92. To share with you. Obviously we can't read every greeting to you, but at least we can tell you what places have sent greetings. Our brothers from Albania say, we feel right next to you in heart, mind and spirit during the program. Our brothers from Benin, Bolivia, Bulgaria, the Central African Republic, Central America, Congo, Kinshasa, all send their love and greetings. Our brothers in France also send their love and say how encouraged they are to see love in action with the help that's being given to those affected by the disasters. Our brothers from Greece, Haiti, and India send their love. The brothers in India say, we're excited that this new center of pure worship will have a tremendous effect on the work in the far corners of the earth. We are still getting used to saying Warwick instead of Brooklyn. And I must admit, I have that problem too. Kazakhstan, Madagascar, Malawi, New Caledonia, Portugal, Spain, South Africa, Ukraine, all these brothers have sent in messages wishing us the best with this dedication program. Then finally, from Zambia, the brothers say, the move of world headquarters shows that Jehovah's blessing is not dependent on location, and that he will bless the work of the governing body as it continues to take care of kingdom interests worldwide from these new facilities. Are you happy to receive those greetings? We have just one announcement to make at this point. Each of us has an opportunity to share in the joy of making voluntary offerings. At our Bethel complexes, contribution boxes are located in the main lobbies. There, donations can also be made by debit or credit card. If you're attending at an assembly hall or kingdom hall, contributions can be deposited in the boxes labeled for the worldwide work. Please note that all contributions to the worldwide work of Jehovah's Witnesses are cared for by the local branch office. Therefore, it would be appreciated if those who contribute by check would simply make their checks payable to Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, you may be seated. What is next on our program? Well, we have 5 talks that are going to be given by 5 members of the governing body. Now, as you listen to these talks, one of them is going to reveal to us some adjusted understanding. Another is going to tell us about the year text for next year. Other talks are going to motivate us. And then another talk is going to show a change in our ministry. Have I got your attention? Well, to start off this intriguing series of talks, we're going to invite Brother David Splain to talk to us on this intriguing title, Ezekiel's Temple Vision and You.
Well, did you enjoy your tour? Not your tour of Warwick, Wankel, Patterson. But did you enjoy the tour that we recently made of the temple that we've been reading about in the book of Ezekiel? Now, that was quite a tour. Can you imagine that we were transported onto an extremely high mountain, and we were given a vision of an imposing temple complex. And we had quite a tour guide, didn't we? An angel whose appearance was of copper. And he showed us some wonderful things. Well, it's all very interesting. But what does it mean? Now, for many years, our publications have stated that the temple that Ezekiel saw was Jehovah's great spiritual temple. And we came to that conclusion because there are admittedly some similarities between the tabernacle that Moses was connected with and the temple of Ezekiel. And so the thought was that the temple of Ezekiel and the tabernacle, they represented the same thing. And we know that the tabernacle represents the spiritual temple because the Apostle Paul said so. But it's true that there are similarities between the tabernacle and Ezekiel's temple. But there are major differences as well. The tabernacle really focuses on the high priest and the sacrifice that he makes on the Day of Atonement. And so we can say that the tabernacle is really centered on the future work that Jesus was going to do as the great high priest and the sacrifice that he was going to make. Now, what about the temple that Ezekiel saw? Is there a high priest? No. What about the Day of Atonement? Is the Day of Atonement mentioned? No, it is not. And so we can see that there are differences between the tabernacle and the temple of Ezekiel. Now, right up front, let's be clear. Ezekiel was not touring the spiritual temple. Let's see why not. But first, let's review what Brother Lush told us about the spiritual temple. What is it? Now, Brother Lush said that it's an arrangement. But he didn't stop there, did he? He said it's an arrangement for worship based on the sacrifice of Christ. Now, what do we know about the sacrifice of Christ? Let's take the Bible and turn to Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9. We're going to read verses 11 and 12. Hebrews 9, 11 and 12. Paul writes, "However, when Christ came as a high priest of the good things that have already taken place," so the spiritual temple was actually in existence in Jesus' day, because these things had already taken place. "He passed through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. He entered into the holy place, not with the blood of goats and of young bulls, but with his own blood, once for all time." So what do we learn from this? Well, we learn that Jesus' sacrifice is offered once for all time, and the blood of bulls and goats, that doesn't enter the picture. One sacrifice, and that's enough. After that, there are no grain offerings, there are no guilt offerings, there are no whole burnt offerings, and there are no sin offerings, because that one sacrifice of Christ is enough. The spiritual temple is centered around the sacrifice of Christ. Now, what did we see when we toured Ezekiel's temple? Grain offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, the blood of bulls and goats, and even purification for the priests, who don't at all seem to have been declared righteous by means of their faith in the blood of Christ. So we can see that there's something different about Ezekiel's temple. And really, Ezekiel and Paul cover different ground. So if you're taking notes, this is the time to make a little note. From Paul, we learn about Jehovah's arrangement for worship. From Ezekiel, we learn about Jehovah's, wait for it, Jehovah's standard for worship. From Ezekiel, we learn about Jehovah's standard for worship. Now, what do we learn about Jehovah's standards from those 9 chapters of Ezekiel? Well, he has high standards. He has very high standards. Now think about it. Where was Ezekiel's temple located? Was it located on a mountain of average height? Mount Moriah, maybe? Or the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem? No. It was located on a very high mountain. A temple on a very high mountain. A house of Jehovah on a very high mountain. Maybe even above the tops of the mountains? Where have I heard about that before? Didn't I read something about that somewhere in the Bible? Yes, Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2. Let's read it. Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2. It says, "In the final part of the days," that doesn't sound like 29 CE, does it? "In the final part of the days, the mountain of the house of Jehovah will become firmly established above the top of the mountains, and it will be raised up above the hills, and to it all the nations will stream." Well, that prophecy helps us to understand when Ezekiel's temple vision finds its major fulfillment. Not in 29 CE, when we first see the spiritual temple take shape, but in the final part of the days. Now, when is it? What is it that is this firmly established above the tops of the mountains? What do we know the answer to that? It's Jehovah's worship, isn't it? And so Jehovah's worship is established above the tops of the mountains in the final part of the days. And so Ezekiel's temple vision must be fulfilled in the final part of the days, not in 29 CE. Now, the mountain that Ezekiel saw is not the only thing that's elevated. There are gates leading to the temple area, and you know those gates are some 100 feet tall. And there are guard chambers at the entryways, so that no unclean person can come in. Why? Because Jehovah's high standards of morality must be respected. Now, there's another striking feature of Ezekiel's temple. There was a wall around the entire perimeter, the entire temple area. Now, each side was almost a mile long, but the temple itself was only about 850 feet to a side. So you have the little temple area, relatively, and then you have this great expanse all around. We have a picture, maybe this will give us an idea. Do you see the temple in the middle there? And then that wide perimeter and the wall around the temple. Why? Jehovah answered at Ezekiel 43:9. Let them put their spiritual prostitution far away from me. Now, someone who is familiar with the layout of ancient Jerusalem would understand this. Because really there was only a wall that separated the temple in Jerusalem from ordinary housing. So as the people began to worship idols and they brought immorality and all kinds of horrible things into their homes, they were actually bringing this right up against the wall of the temple. And so Jehovah God is saying, no more, enough. I want to keep it far away from me. Now, Ezekiel's temple vision has a major and a minor fulfillment. So we'll talk about the minor fulfillment for a moment. In chapter 8, Ezekiel described conditions that prevailed when the Temple of Solomon was functioning. 70 men offering incense to creeping things and loathsome beasts. 25 men bowing down to the sun. Women weeping for the god Tammuz. But to his great relief, Ezekiel sees none of that in his temple vision. Instead, he sees pure worship being carried on in a way that he would have understood, that would have had Jehovah's approval back then. So, after the Jews were released from Babylonian captivity, they would be able to worship Jehovah acceptably. After the Jews were released from Babylonian captivity, they would be able to restore pure worship in the way that Jehovah approved. Now, the title of this talk is Ezekiel's Temple and You. So where do we fit into the picture? Well, it's simple. We are living in the time of the fulfillment of Ezekiel's temple vision. And in the major fulfillment, we find that true worship has been restored. Since when? Well, since when in particular has the mountain of the house of Jehovah been lifted up above the tops of the mountains? Since 1919. What a coincidence. Because in 1919, Jehovah's people were also freed from captivity to Babylon the Great. And so after being freed from captivity to Babylon the Great, now we see an improvement in pure worship, getting better and better. And since that time, Jehovah has progressively guided us to adopt his high standards. Now think about his high moral standards. Nobody is admitted to permanent association with the organization until they have the approval of the elders, until the elders say yes, they are acceptable. Now, I think back 65 years ago when I started publishing, and I know that many of you have been publishers a lot longer than that, but I can remember back 65 years ago when I started to publish, I just turned in a report. Nobody asked me any questions. You didn't have to be approved. When you got baptized, you didn't go through the questions with the elders. There were no elders. No more. No more. We can see how progressively Jehovah has raised the standard. And what about unrepentant wrongdoers? They're not allowed to remain in the congregation. That wasn't always the case. So we can see how Jehovah God has been progressively guiding us, leading us to a better and better relationship with Him. Now, He's also cleansed His people spiritually. Think about what's happened since 1919. How Jehovah's people have worked hard to keep spiritual uncleanness far away from pure worship, casting off false doctrines and practices tainted with idolatry and paganism. And what has been the result? Jehovah has blessed His people, and there's tangible proof of that blessing. Nations are streaming to the mountain of the house of Jehovah, and they come because they have heard that God is with His people. So what have we learned from this brief discussion? This: while the spiritual temple is Jehovah's arrangement for worship, Ezekiel's temple emphasizes God's standards for worship. And what else have we learned? This: we see the arrangement of the spiritual temple since 29 CE, but we see the fulfillment of Ezekiel's temple vision since 1919. Well, we're grateful to our angelic tour guide for the remarkable visit that we had to the temple, but we're also more grateful to Jehovah God for helping us to see what that remarkable vision means for you and for me today.
Thank you very much, Brother Splain, for such a clear explanation. And clear as it was, we're all looking forward to the replay, aren't we? So that we can get all those details, because that was a very interesting and exciting discussion. Well, next on our program, Brother Mark Sanderson of the governing body is going to talk to us on this interesting theme: never, ever lose hope. Hope is absolutely essential to our strength as Christians. No hope equals no power. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 14 says, "A person's spirit can sustain him through illness, but who can bear a crushed spirit?" Or if you look at the footnote, who can bear complete despair? What's the point? No hope equals no power. But then there's also low hope equals low power. Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 10 says, "If you become discouraged in the day of distress, your strength will be meager." Low hope equals low power. Well, immediately, we see why it is so important for us as Christians that we never, ever lose hope. Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 19 says that hope is the anchor of our souls, or the footnote, the anchor of our lives. But now, brothers, what is hope? That's a word we use all the time, but what does it really mean? The original language words that are used in the Bible that are translated hope mean to wait eagerly and to expect good. So hope is not simply the desire for something good. It also includes the basis for believing that that good thing is going to come. Now, let's look at an illustration. We might wish that a friend would come to our aid and help us during a time of trial. But now, what if that friend had helped us many, many times before? Well, now it changes, doesn't it? Now our hope is not simply wishful thinking. There is a real reason to believe that that friend will help us. You see, that is real hope. Not just the desire for something good, but the real basis to believe that we can receive it. Well, now, brothers, what could cause us to begin to lose hope? Well, I don't think I need to tell you this, But life in this system is certainly not trouble-free. Were you aware of that? Most of us, we recognize that our physical bodies are breaking down. If you're over 50, no doubt you've had to learn a new alphabet. EKG, MRI, HDL, LDL, and the list goes on and on. If you don't know what that means, well, okay, I give up. But in addition to our own health problems and challenges, we have to cope with the health problems of our close relatives, or perhaps our marriage mate, our elderly parents, whatever it may be. And in addition to that, we also have to cope with the loss of some of our very dear loved ones in death. What if you live in Venezuela? Due to the unrest in that country, the reports that we have received as of August the 10th indicate that 47 of our brothers and sisters have been murdered in that land. And many more have been victims of other terrible criminal acts. Our hearts go out to our brothers in Venezuela. What if you live in Texas or Mexico or the Caribbean? Well, you know that we have just had devastating natural disasters. Some of our brothers have lost their homes, their places of worship, as well as virtually all of their material things. What if you live in Russia? In that land, 175,000 of our brothers can now no longer worship Jehovah in freedom. Well, if we were to continue to focus our attention on all of these negative things, this would not be the Kingdom Hall, it would be the Wailing Wall. Isn't that true? But I have to tell you, brothers, that is not the spirit of Jehovah's people. That is not the spirit in the room right now. It is not the spirit of God's people anywhere on the face of this earth. Despite all of the challenges that we are experiencing, we do not give up. Do you agree? Now, why is this the case? Isaiah chapter 40 has the answer for us. Now, let's begin in reading here in verse 26. The prophet encourages us to look up. It says, "Lift up your eyes to heaven and see. Who has created these things? It is the one who brings out their army by number. He calls them all by name. Because of his vast dynamic energy and his awe-inspiring power, not one of them is missing." Well, what's the point? You see, the source of our hope, the one we put our confidence in, Jehovah, has vast dynamic energy. He has awe-inspiring power. Look at verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Jehovah, the creator of the ends of the earth, is a God for all eternity. He never tires out or grows weary. His understanding is unsearchable. Yes, Jehovah is the ultimate power source in the universe. He never grows tired. He never grows weary. But now, how do we benefit? Because we put our hope in him. Well, look at what verse 29 says. He gives power to the tired one, and full might to those lacking strength. Well, now, is this something that we can connect somehow to our physical power? In other words, that somehow Jehovah invigorates our own physical bodies? Well, not really, because look at verse 30, what it says. Boys will tire out and grow weary, and young men will stumble and fall. So this help from Jehovah is not connected to our physical strength. It's not connected to our age or our physical power. What really then is the key to our gaining this power from this unlimited power source that is Jehovah? Well, verse 31. But those hoping in Jehovah will regain power.
Well, now that's an interesting expression. Problems, pressures, persecution, ban, imprisonment, natural disaster. The list goes on and on and on. If we focus our attention on all of these problems and difficulties, what happens? We just feel our battery being completely drained. We lose all of our power. But what happens when we turn our attention to our magnificent God, Jehovah? What happens when we remember how much Jehovah loves us? What happens when we remember how many times Jehovah has come through and given us exactly what we need, exactly at the right time? We immediately, as verse 31 says, we immediately begin to regain power. We feel it coming back into us. And although we may have been like a tree that's lost its leaves and just looks like it's dead, what happens? Well, we put forth new shoots and we begin to come back to life because of the power that's coming from Jehovah. Well, as a result, what does the end of the verse say? They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not tire out. Brothers, what's the point? No hope, no power. Low hope, low power. Hope in Jehovah, unlimited power. Would you agree? When we hope in Jehovah, we can walk, we can run, we can fly, we can even soar if we never ever lose hope in Jehovah. Now, brothers, I want to tell you, this is not pop psychology. This is not the power of positive thinking. Wherever I go on this beautiful earth and I have the opportunity to meet Jehovah's people, I have seen with my own eyes how Jehovah is renewing the power of his people. They are never conquered by the situations they are facing. The power from Jehovah is helping them to remain firm. What about our dear brothers in Venezuela? Despite the many problems and pressures that have come upon our brothers in that land due to the unrest that's occurring, did you know that in 2014, there were 26,252 regular pioneers in that land? But this year, in May of 2017, in the midst of all of these problems that are occurring in that country, they recorded an all-time peak in regular pioneers, 34,353, an increase of more than 8,000. What do you think of that? Those dear brothers are not accomplishing that in their own strength. They're hoping in Jehovah, and they're renewing or regaining their power. What about those brothers in the disaster relief areas? Do you remember what Brother Bro said in the report on JW Broadcasting about our brothers on the island of Tortola? Their kingdom hall, which they had been using for decades, was destroyed, rendered unusable. And yet what did the brothers do? Every day they went and sat in the Kingdom Hall parking lot. Do you remember that? And why? Because they knew, they had confidence that this would be the place where the help from Jehovah would originate. And they were not disappointed. Brother Bro assures me that now arrangements are being made so that that Kingdom Hall is going to be restored and back up in use for the benefit of our dear brothers in Tortola. And what about those dear brothers and sisters in Russia? Well, what did Jehovah do to make the spirit of those brothers and sisters soar, even though they were facing a very, very difficult situation? Please watch. elderly people to small children, people in every walk of life have all wanted to express themselves in some way and tell the authorities here in Russia how they feel about this action on Jehovah's people worldwide. It has had such a unifying effect on our brotherhood.
I have no idea what Mr. Putin will do when he opens all these letters, not just mine. Having written these letters shows how the whole organization is upholding Jehovah's sovereignty in these last days.
I consider participating in this campaign a great privilege. Even though we are separated by language and distance, we are united by our love for Jehovah.
Jehovah's servants may be considered as a minority in Russia, but we are associated in a worldwide brotherhood. And as a part of the worldwide brotherhood, I wanted to participate in this campaign by writing letters.
I wrote to the Prime Minister so he will let my brothers go to the kingdom halls. I am sending this letter to ask the Russian government, please, to allow Jehovah's Witnesses and their children to worship Jehovah, because they are good.
We are hard-pressed in every way, but not cramped beyond movement. We are perplexed, but not absolutely with no way out. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are knocked down, but not destroyed. Brothers and sisters, we do not know what challenges await us in 2018. However, we do know that if we never, ever lose hope in Jehovah, we will regain power. How appropriate, then, that the governing body has chosen for our 2018 year text, Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 31. Those hoping in Jehovah will regain power. Yes, dear brothers and sisters, we will always have access to the ultimate power supply in the universe if we never, ever lose hope in our magnificent, our wonderful God, Jehovah. Well, thank you very much, Brother Sanderson. We look forward to seeing that year text continue to remind us of the need of hope. Next on our program, we have Brother Samuel Hurd of the governing body, and we notice his title is Protected by Obedience.
During this talk, if you should happen to hear a new spiritual gem, put it out of your mind. I have nothing new to give you. A mother deer parks her fawn baby in tall grass. She tells her baby to stay put, and it does. She leaves and does not return for many hours. In fact, its protection depends on its obedience to its mother's command. Now think back when you were small children. Didn't your parents lay down some commands for you to follow for your protection? Let's take a look at something. Let's go to Ephesians in our Bibles, And let's look at the 6th chapter and a couple of verses. It says, "Children, be obedient to your parents in union with the Lord, for this is righteous. Honor your father and your mother," is the first command with a promise, "that it may go well with you, and you may remain a long time on the earth." Now, all of us, as adults, are children under our Heavenly Father Jehovah. And of course, we'll always be children under Jehovah. He expects us to be obedient children, just like you would expect your child, if you should have one, to be obedient to you and your suggestions and perhaps some of your commands. And when we are subjected to Jehovah to this degree, we're protected. And just as the scripture said for the small children, it applies to us as well, that it may go well with you. And we want it to go well with us. That's what we're all about. We want to serve Jehovah loyally and faithfully so that we can gain his well done. And just as a child just may ask his dad, why? You ever had a child do you that way? Why? Why do birds sing? Why? Why is the sky blue? There's no end to his whys. In fact, you may have answered, "Do it because I told you to do it." Well, your answer, it was bluntly, there's no doubt about that. Now, why would you answer a child bluntly like that? Well, it may be because of what he asked of you. What was behind the why? Well, he's just too young. He's too young for you to go and try to explain the why. It may be that this example could be a reality. A 5-year-old little girl asks, "Mommy, why does Jehovah let babies die from lack of food?" See, the little girl just heard that on the television set. Babies are dying for lack of food. Mommy says, "Honey," puts her arm around the little girl, "it has to do with the issue of sovereignty that was raised a long time ago." Some of you may have wondered about that question when you were small. Even when you became adults without a knowledge of the Bible, you may have wondered, why does God, you didn't know him by Jehovah, why does God let little children starve to death? You've seen pictures on television and in the movies where a little baby is just hanging on to its mother's breast and there's not a drop of milk in that mommy's breast, not one. And you may have asked yourself, why? But now you have the answer to why. And you help so many others to get the answer to why. That God is not responsible for the death of these children, but there's someone else who's responsible. And why has God delayed? Well, we all know because of an issue that came on the scene years ago. And it has to be settled beyond question. And it's going to be settled beyond question. Think back. Jehovah told the Israelites to impound their source of water to keep it clean. Why? He didn't say. Harmful germs could be present, but couldn't be seen by the naked eye. There was no microscope. It wasn't invented until the 1590s. They had to trust and obey for protection. And we have to trust Jehovah too, even today, for protection. And when we listen to Jehovah, then we're blessed. And we want to listen to Jehovah. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons. He's our creator. He's our life giver. He's our life sustainer. If he did not respond in this loving way, none of us would be here. We would expire. And we all know that. So he's loving. Here's another reason. He's lived longer than we have. And if we live forever, we will never catch up to how long he has lived. He's been and seen more than we have or ever will see. He has more experience. He has done things that we have not done and perhaps will never, ever be able to do. I'd like to tell you a little story about when I was a young boy. We had a little house. We had a fireplace. In wintertime, we'd gather in the living room near the fireplace, put coal on the fireplace, some wood. And at times, a piece of the fire would blow out, come out of the fireplace onto the living room carpet or linoleum. And my dad would just pick it up in his hands and toss it back in. And I thought, well, my, that's a grand thing to do. So the next time it blew out, I grabbed a hold of it. Never again. I learned my lesson. Now, my dad's hands were calloused because he was a mule driver. And he held on to the reins day in and day out for years upon years. And his hands were just like leather. And so he knew that he could hold that coal for a short while and get rid of it and it would not burn again. I did not have that knowledge. I had not lived long enough to gain that knowledge. But my dad had. You see, my dad was 56 years old when I was born. And today, if he would be here, well, then he would be 138 years old. So my dad never was a young dad for me, but he was a good dad. And of course, he was a strong man. Jehovah created the sun. How hot is the sun? Well, they tell us at its surface is 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit or 5,600 degrees Celsius. At its core or center, it's 27 million degrees Fahrenheit or 15 million degrees Celsius. A cremation oven is only 1,400 degrees to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in order to turn a body to ashes. Now, just for the sake of impressing us with Jehovah's greatness, don't add any real truth to this, because we do not know. We only know that he created the sun. But just to impress us with Jehovah's greatness, we can say he could juggle the sun in his hands. That's our God, Jehovah. New Jerusalem will not need the sun for light. The Bible tells us the glory of God illuminates it. Revelation 21:23. When we obey the direction Jehovah gives, we are totally protected. That's why we are not worried about the Great Tribulation. What we have to worry about is what comes up before the Great Tribulation. And the devil's going to do all that he can to destroy our relationship with God. Now, you can bet on that. And he's going to start with all of us. He's not going to select just individuals, but he wants every one of us to come over to his side of the issue. And so he's not going to leave you without test. So we're going to be tested. Now, some of you may have already been tested to the limit. We don't know. But Jehovah does. If you have, well, then you will not be tested to any other limit. You may have a test, but you've proven that you will be able to survive that test. But right now, we need to learn to follow the rules that Jehovah lays out. The Bible mentions only two roads for mankind to follow. Here they are. Matthew 7:13 and 14 says, "Go in through the narrow gate, because broad is the gate and spacious is the road leading off into destruction, and many are going in through it. Whereas narrow is the gate and cramped the road leading off into life, and few are finding it." Now, you're not on the spacious road. Not at all. Disobedient travelers are on it. Those permitted to do their own thing. Innumerable people dance along this wicked highway. But you have chosen the cramped road. And that's the road that Jehovah has pointed out for each and every one of us. And he's drawing us to him, all because of what he sees in the heart. Now, we may not be able to see what Jehovah sees in the heart, and that can work against us if we're not careful. We can start talking about it, brother, because of what we do see. But Jehovah overlooks that. He lets the blood of Jesus cover that. And he looks for the good, and he sees the good, and he wants that person to gain life. And he's going to help that person, even though we can't see the good that Jehovah God sees. Now, perhaps in the near future, our obedience will be put to the test as never before. Let's not depend on the strength that we have demonstrated in our past tests. Neither should we conclude that we are too spiritual or too holy to cower under pressure. Now's the time to make obedience a habit. Don't wait till the test comes. Peter, one of the strongest of Jesus' apostles, and the other apostles ran for their lives the night Jesus was arrested. But we find that Peter crept back, but he stayed at a distance, a good distance. But when questioned, he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." And that's Mark 14:71. Now that's Peter. Are you as strong as Peter? Maybe. Maybe not. And it's that maybe not that we care about. So let's not depend on how long we've been in the truth. Let's stay in the truth. And the only way we're going to do that is to stay with Jehovah. He's helped us to get his spiritual balance. And we want to capture it with every ounce of energy that we possibly can so that we do not falter in any way and fall. So thanks to Jehovah and Jesus, we're here. But let's trust Jehovah 100%. The Bible tells us the one trusting in Jehovah will be protected. And that's what this talk is all about. Obedience brings protection. We need help to stay awake spiritually. Help comes from our brothers and sisters. The Bible says, consider one another, to incite to love and fine works, not forsaking the meeting, our meeting together, as some have the custom, but encouraging one another, and all the more so as you see the day drawing near. Now here's an example. You're driving a car at night and it's raining. You can hear the rain hitting against the top of the car, and you can hear windshield wipers slapping against the side of the windshield. The lights from oncoming cars are somewhat blinding. All these things are sleep-inducing. You begin to nod. You're about to fall asleep. Your wife slaps you. Just sitting in the passenger seat. He slaps you. You regain control of yourself. Aren't you grateful for the slap? She is. Every meeting we attend is a slap from someone who loves us to keep us awake spiritually. So be obedient, be there, be protected. Your life depends on it.
Thank you very much, Brother Hood. Now, I don't know about you, but I got at least 2 new points out of that. I wrote it down. Don't be thin-skinned and be willing to be slapped. Do you know, I love that talk. I used to give talks like that once too. And then they made me the chairman. I'm sorry, Brother Hood, I had to wait 12 months to say that. Well, now we look forward to the next speaker. This is Brother Stephen Lett, also of the governing body. He gives us the theme here, never give up much for little.
Jesus gave a parable
about a young man who exchanged peace and prosperity in his father's household for a debauched, miserable, desperate life. Foolishly, he exchanged much for little. It's the story of the prodigal son, Luke chapter 15. In contrast, in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus gave a story about a traveling merchant who sold everything he had to buy one pearl of high value. When we understand the meaning of that parable, in actuality, he exchanged little for much. Now, obviously, you brothers and sisters do not want to imitate the prodigal son. You want to imitate the traveling merchant. And Jehovah doesn't want you to give away much for little. He wants you to give away little for much, and Jehovah is anxious to give you this much. That's why he's recorded parables, such as the two we just mentioned, and also real-life stories in his word that depict both scenarios so that we can be wise. In fact, let's briefly discuss 4 Bible examples of ones who foolishly gave up much for little, and then we'll talk about 4 Bible examples of ones who gave up little for much. Our first example, Satan. Now, Satan gave up a priceless, honored position of trust in Jehovah's service that he may have enjoyed for eons of time. And what did he receive for what he gave up? A relatively short, miserable life of independence from Jehovah, and ultimately, he will have earned for himself the lake of fire. We know right now Satan cannot be happy at all. Jehovah is described as a happy God. 1 Timothy 1:11. Jesus, the happy potentate. 1 Timothy 6:15. Happy is the nation whose God is Jehovah. Psalm 33:12. But Satan is never described as anything close to happy, is he? I mean, he's described as an enraged, roaring lion. An accuser who accuses day and night. One who has great anger because he knows his time is short. Does that sound like a happy person? But what caused Satan to give up so much for so little? Pride. Pride actually caused him to think that he was smarter than Jehovah. Can you imagine that the clay was smarter than the potter? Pride caused him to think that life without Jehovah would actually be better life. Well, may we never pridefully feel that we know better than Jehovah in any areas. For example, how to treat disfellowshipped ones, the need to avoid bad association, marrying only in the Lord as a few examples. May we never pridefully feel that the so-called freedom from Jehovah that the world offers will bring happiness. Let's learn from Satan. Never allow pride to cause you to give up much for little. Now, our second example, Adam and Eve. Satan offered them the opportunity to be like God, his own aspiration. And stupidly, they bought into his hoax. They selfishly gave up their invaluable family ties with the best father they could ever have. They gave up their paradise home, perfect everlasting life, their children's future welfare. All for what? A relatively short, miserable life of independence from Jehovah, and finally non-existence. A total loss. What an outstanding example of giving up much for little. So may we learn from Adam and Eve. Never allow Satan's lies to cause you to give up much for little. Lies such as material things will make you happy, or immorality will make you happy. Unlike Adam and Eve, let's refuse to allow Satan's lies to cause us to give up much for little. Esau, our third example, knew the history of Satan and Adam and Eve, but did he learn from them? No, he too lacked appreciation for sacred things. Esau was Isaac's firstborn son, and in Bible times this had great value. But he thought only of his immediate physical cravings. Genesis 25:32 says he became very hungry and cried out, "I am about to die." Was he really? Should he have not endured a little bit longer rather than sell his birthright? Now, pretty quick, he realized his mistake. He sold something with real value for what? I mean, what did he receive? Some bread and lentil stew. Apparently the stew didn't even have any meat in it. We Bethelites, we can get bread, lentils, and meat for free in the Bethel pantry. What is a lesson we can learn from Esau? Well, open up to Hebrews chapter 12, please. And here's a very interesting lesson Jehovah teaches us about Esau. Hebrews 12, verse 16. "And watch that among you there is no one who is sexually immoral, nor anyone who does not appreciate sacred things like Esau, who gave up his rights as firstborn in exchange for one meal." But interestingly, Jehovah compares a person who commits sexual immorality to what Esau did. And if you think about it, both lacking self-control, give in to fleshly desire. That's what Esau did. That's what a person who commits sexual immorality. Well, may none of us allow immorality to cause us to sell our figurative birthright, our inheritance in Jehovah's new world. And think about this. How long did that bread and lentil stew last Esau? How long did it benefit him? A few hours? Soon he would have been hungry again. Well, similarly, how long does the so-called pleasure of an immoral person last? Only a short time, followed by horrible consequences, including a bad conscience. Now, our fourth example, the rich young ruler in Jesus' day. He held high position, had many possessions. Jesus even felt love for him. But was he prepared to give up his wealth for something infinitely more valuable and permanent, the treasure of following Jesus? No. When Jesus invited him, the Bible says, he went away grieved. He couldn't bring himself to give up his many possessions. Instead, he gave up a wonderful future. Obviously, he gave up the wrong thing, didn't he? Where are those who did follow Jesus now? Immortal kings and priests with Christ in heaven in Jehovah's presence. But unless that young ruler later changed his ways, he and all that was his are now dust. What a classic example of giving up so much for so little. May we never allow any of the material attractions of this world to cause us to give up our wonderful future in Jehovah's new world. Well, we've considered our four negative examples. Now let's move to our four positive examples. Ones who gave up little for much. First, Abraham. At Jehovah's invitation, Abraham gave up a comfortable life in upscale Ur. At Jehovah's invitation, he took his family on a long, dangerous trek to the land of promise. And there, he willingly lived the rest of his life in tents. But what did Abraham receive for what he gave up? He gained a permanent place in Jehovah's heart. Jehovah himself called him my friend. Because of his faith, Jehovah swore that through one of his descendants, all nations would be blessed. And that descendant, the Messiah, Jesus, will soon resurrect Abraham to enjoy the real life. But now, are we willing to give up material possessions and comforts in order, for example, to enter the full-time ministry? Or maybe be able to move and serve where the need is greater in order to secure a permanent place in Jehovah's heart. Like Abraham, are we willing to give up little for much? Our second example, Moses. Centuries after Abraham, Moses also gave up the right things. Raised as royalty in Pharaoh's palace, he was groomed for greatness in the world of his day. He knew all about Egypt's advanced civilization and culture. But the Bible doesn't elaborate on anything that Moses accomplished in Egypt. Why? Because anything he may have achieved there was utterly insignificant compared to what he did in Jehovah's service. Moses received the law that led Israel to the Messiah. No other prophet knew Jehovah, quote, face to face. He did well in giving up life in Egypt in order to carry out God's commission. As for the wealth and grandeur of ancient Egypt, we can see crumbling remnants of it in museums. But Moses gained God's favor. He gained the real life. He gained a permanent place in our spiritual heritage and a permanent place in all of our hearts. Well, let's go to our third example, Jesus. The best example of gaining a lot more than he gave up. Like Abraham and Moses, he willingly gave up a comfortable life. Now, in his case, life in heaven alongside Jehovah. But he emptied himself, became a human, ministered to other humans, even gave his life, trusting that Jehovah would give life back to him. He gained the great joy of fulfilling his Father's righteous purpose and redeeming those he was especially fond of, humans. If you think about it, apparently Jesus didn't really realize how much he would receive for what he gave up. Because remember in John 17:5, he said, Father, glorify me with the glory I had alongside you before the world was. In other words, Father, please give me back what I had before. But Jehovah gave him a lot more, did he? And that's always true of Jehovah, really, if you think about it. You can't outgive Jehovah. Jehovah gave him a name more excellent than the angels. Jehovah gave him all authority in heaven and earth. He even gave him immortality and incorruption. And we know that means an indestructible life, an indestructible organism or body. Now, our fourth example, Jesus' apostles. Peter, Andrew, James, and John abandoned their fishing businesses, didn't they? All the other apostles, the Bible says, left all things. And remember, Peter asked, Lord, we've left all things and followed you. What then will there be for us? Well, Jesus assured him that anyone who gives up material things or even family relationships for him or for the sake of the good news would receive 100-fold even now. If you think about that, that's a 10,000% return. Plus, he will get everlasting life. In fact, think about it. Where are these apostles now? Like Jesus, immortal, incorruptible, spirit creatures. Open up to Revelation chapter 20 and notice what is said about these ones. Revelation chapter 20, please. And notice verse 6. It says, happy. Notice that word, happy. And holy is anyone having part in the first resurrection. Over these the second death has no authority, but they will be priests of God and of the Christ, and they will rule as kings with him for 1,000 years. So they're going to be happy in their assignment. This is assured in the scripture. Why are they going to be so happy? Acts 20:35, there's more happiness in giving than receiving. And what an occasion the 1,000 years will be for giving. Can you imagine assisting humans to transform the entire planet into its originally intended condition? Imagine working closely with the Christ to empty the grave and gradually helping humans to come to perfection. And then after the 1,000 years, being able to share in the final crushing of evil Satan and his wicked demons. What happifying work all of this will be. But what will be their main source of happiness? Well, being part of the main instrument, the kingdom, that Jehovah will use to sanctify and vindicate his holy name. I thought I'd go ahead and put to work that new understanding Brother Jackson revealed earlier. But it's true, to vindicate Jehovah's name, his reputation. That'll bring the greatest happiness to them. You can be sure, when the apostles gave up their little fishing businesses, and the other apostles, their worldly pursuits, they had no idea how much they would receive in return. Well, now we've discussed Abraham, Moses, Jesus, the apostles. And there's no doubt about it. They would all wholeheartedly agree that what they gave up was very small compared to what they gained. Well, what about us? We all give up things, don't we? Great and small for Jehovah. We may give up time, energy, money, possessions. We may have to give up a little face, prestige in this world. But we will experience what all those good Bible examples did. What we get back always far outweighs any loss. In fact, most of us would probably say we feel like we haven't given up anything. We're receiving, like those men of old, 100 times more now. And we are sure to gain life, the real life, if we never give up much for little.
I'm sure we all totally enjoyed that encouragement. Well, now, at this point, you're probably thinking we said there was an adjusted understanding. You got that one? A lot of encouragement, yes. Then there was the one about the year text, yes. What was the other one? Well, we've come to the final talk. If we don't get it now, it's not going to come. Remember, we said an adjustment to the way we do our ministry. So with eager anticipation, we look forward to hearing from Brother Anthony Morris, who will talk to us about making our blows count.
We are involved in the greatest preaching campaign in all history. We publish quality literature, 240 lands. It's amazing. However, we're not about seeking praise for the quality of our magazines or the hundreds of languages that we're translating in. What's our focus? Well, we want to imitate what the Apostle Paul wrote about himself, and the governing body really wants this message to be clear to all of God's people that are preachers and teachers of the kingdom. So find what I'm referring to in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And you'll remember he's describing his pursuit of the prize, and it's quite profound when you reflect on it. You'll see where it fits every one of us that are dedicated to the true God. Verse 26. Therefore, the way I am running is not aimlessly. The way I am aiming my blows is so as not to be striking the air. So, you can picture it, running aimlessly. It's a waste of time and energy. Striking the air, a waste of time and energy. So, the time left reduced. The end is so close. And like I've told folks, if you look around and you don't see how different it is and how close it is, you must be in a coma. And that's okay. God can bring you out of a coma if you were all right before that. But the governing body is concerned with the limited time we have left that we make our blows count. So, to truly make our blows count, what should be the focus of our work? We're not left without knowing how Jehovah thinks. It's been here all along, but sometimes we can individually and organizationally get distracted. Turn to Acts chapter 13. Acts chapter 13. And they were preaching there in the first century, and we get some results, but we also get God's thinking on the matter and what He wants us to focus on. Acts 13, verse 48. When those of the nations heard this message, they began to rejoice and to glorify the word of Jehovah. Now notice, and all those who were rightly disposed for everlasting life became believers. There it is. That's the focus of our work. Searching for those rightly disposed for everlasting life. It's not complicated. And to try to help somebody that's not rightly disposed, frankly, is a waste of time. Now, we don't read hearts. We understand that people can change, and we continue with that. But overall, Jehovah wants us to understand, let's search out for those that are rightly disposed for everlasting life. Because no one comes to the truth, remember, as Jesus taught us, unless Jehovah draws him. We don't want to get thinking our personality draws people to the truth. You might be likable, it's wonderful. However, Jehovah draws those rightly disposed. And you become friends and such if you have the privilege to study with people. But that's what it's about. Searching those rightly disposed ones. That's who he draws. Those that are righteously. He reads the heart. And so we're in this search work, but we're looking to focus on those rightly disposed. So, with that clear, the governing bodies identified two problems. And this is what we want to pass on, and it can adversely affect our effectiveness in the ministry. And this is what we're about. A preaching and teaching organization. This is who we are. So, for many years, and we acknowledge it, there was a focus on placing magazines, developing magazine routes. It helped some come into the truth, no denying it, because our literature is the best on the earth. Others have accepted our magazines for many years. Many years. And they've never done a thing about the truth. But they're still going back. Coming back from the day of service. How many magazines you place? Now they mean well, God loves us, but excuse me. That's not the focus of our work. It has to refocus on what we're all about. And just think about it. Jesus commanded, go therefore and make disciples of people of all the nations. We don't have the authority to change what the head of the congregation has said, and go along the lines of go therefore and place a lot of literature. That's not our focus. Even though it's the best on the planet, we're about searching for the rightly disposed so they can become disciples of Christ. And these ones that have taken our literature for years, and as we said, individuals might change. They remind us of what happened in Ezekiel's day. And some of you are Bible readers, scholars, if you will. But let's read it anyway in Ezekiel 33 and find what he faced. And we face this. It's a reality. So, given the limited time, we have to make sure that Jehovah's Spirit's moving us this way, that we accept this is the way it is. Our day as well. Now notice verse 31 of Ezekiel 33, 31 and 32. They will crowd in to sit before you as my people, and they will hear your words, but they will not do them. For with their mouth they flatter you, but their heart is greedy for dishonest gain. Look, you are to them like a romantic love song, sung with a beautiful voice and skillfully played on a stringed instrument. They will hear your words, but no one will act on them. That's every territory. And if you've worked it for many years, you can have faces come to mind, just like that. Come to occasional meetings and such. Well, time's running out. God's making that very clear to us. We need to help people come into the truth. We don't need the flattery and such, and that kind of experience. This is a time for decision. We're looking for people that will act on what they learn. That's where our blows are going to be effective. People have to act on it. And if you're not seeing that, just get searching. Let the angels and Jehovah's Spirit take you to the rightly disposed ones. And something that we forget, our work is twofold. We can forget that sometimes. We're searching and bringing in the rightly disposed, and the others, we're praising and honoring Jehovah, like Brother Loesch mentioned, because they're hearing about Jehovah's Judgment Day. So it's twofold. It's a warning word. You could go a whole morning and not have what you thought was an effective day, no literature, but you praise God, because they're still thinking about Jehovah's Witnesses and their efforts to preach in that territory. So, got to keep that in mind. So that's one problem. Here's problem two that we want to address. We have so many tools to use in the ministry, it can be overwhelming and confusing, even to the best minds. So your older ones don't feel, I'm slipping here, I'm confused. No. The young ones are trying to, often overwhelmed and confused. So our teaching toolbox that we emphasized in recent years, what happened is it became a huge tool shed. A lot of you are nodding. It's okay. That's not disloyal. It's true. It's become a huge tool shed. Now, we appreciate the sample presentations at the midweek meeting. Frankly, many of us are so busy, we can't keep up with all the latest presentations, no matter how good they are. Well, that was good. And then Saturday morning or Sunday, okay, what am I doing today? We had 3 of them in our midweek meeting. I don't know, what am I supposed to do here? And then if you got a critic nearby, oh Lord, And plus, many struggle to keep up with reading all the magazines. You're not a bad person. Jehovah loves you. We understand. So, in view of this, the governing body is adjusting the focus of our ministry. You're getting the message, addressing these 2 problems, and we are 100% with this unanimous. everybody in the departments connected are with it. They can sense Jehovah's Spirit moving it. This is what Jehovah's doing. It's his chariot. He's the driver. So here's the adjustments. Starting January 2018, there will only be 3 public editions of the Watchtower. For those that are tied in, I heard some expressions down front here. Only 3 public editions of the Watchtower and 3 of the Awake magazines the whole year. See? Yeah. I'm excited too. I really am. Now, and what's beautiful about this, they're going to cover one subject in the whole magazine. Start to finish. See? One subject. Now, I have here a hard copy of the first one. So I'm excited about it. And mind you, these are special. This one is special. It's the first one. And Jehovah's moving it toward those rightly disposed for everlasting life. Because he knows his day and hour. And this one is quite easy to start a conversation with. And once you have a question, you're in a conversation already. So whether it's get off my porch or they want to get involved in the answering of that question, it's effective. And the rightly disposed are going to be intrigued. The first one, this question here, is the Bible still relevant today? Certain territories? Maybe not. But there may be righteously disposed ones there. You have a nice cover picture, a woman in the back reading her Bible as the train's going by, people distracted with their watches, their phones, etc. And then, on the inside, and you're going to become familiar with this. You got plenty of time to use it, this tool, over and over. Oh yeah, you'll know right where to go. You might decide, well, I'll go where comments are outdated or ahead of its time, depending on what the person may have said. You have that freedom. So appropriate. Help to avoid problems. Help to resolve problems. Help to cope with problems. Boy, do people need that. And those that are rightly disposed for everlasting life know they have problems. They're honest about it. And so this will touch their heart, and Jehovah will draw them. Now, what's nice about it is that you're going to be able to get very familiar with it, use it, and it'll become part of our permanent teaching toolbox. And that it'll go in the teaching toolbox. You know, even like these skilled craftsmen that have their toolbox. Why are they so good at what they do in many cases? Because they keep using these tools. It's not rocket science. These are craftsmen with these tools. I need this, I need that, to accomplish what they need here. So we only need so many tools in the box. The ones that we can get very good at using. And what's nice, when it's in that permanent teaching toolbox there, you're not changing all the time. You know? And was all that sincere? Yes. But I could tell you stories, but time's running out of some of the things I've heard out in the ministry. I could tell they never read that. You know? But they're out there. God love them. They were knocking on doors with me. You get familiar with the tool. Now what we'll do, we'll evaluate after 2 years, and it might be, we'll see what the governing body decides, that we think we've got sufficient subjects in the magazines for the toolbox. And then we'll just reprint. It's already been written. So you've got your tools. See? Now, you're going to get more details on the teaching toolbox soon. And you'll also be pleased to know this, that the brother's been working hard on this. There's going to be an update on the box, teaching toolbox, and the JW library. We love the JW library. It'll be on the homepage there. It'll be happening in the near future. And this question will arise now, because territories are different, we understand that. What if you find that the teaching toolbox doesn't contain a tool that you have found effective in your territory, like a video that you think is, and you've experienced effectiveness with it? It's okay. Put it in your favorites section. So, don't write in and say, I think that should be in the teaching toolbox. We've gone through all of this at headquarters. It's okay, but you go ahead and put it in your favorite section and use it. Not a problem. Not a problem. Now, so that's covered those with the preaching and the focus of our ministry. And there's another adjustment that I've been asked to announce here. We all enjoy the latest reports on the World Wide Web that we have on jw.org and JW Broadcasting. We love it. And I know recently someone told me they didn't know about Venezuela. Well, it was on jw.org, but you don't want to try to make it feel bad. But there's so much we're getting all throughout the year, and it's timely and a blessing. So, with this in mind, the governing bodies decided that with all of the information on jw.org and JW Broadcast, that as of 2018, we will no longer produce the yearbook of Jehovah's Witnesses, especially if you've been in the truth a long time. Yes, the 2017 is your last one. So that's historic, but come on. Try to convince me you've seen everything we put on jw.org and JW Broadcast. See, God's watching. You're well fed, you've got plenty there. These latest developments are indeed exciting, and as the end fast approaches, let's honor Jehovah and make our blows count. Let's go forth and make disciples of people that are righteously disposed for everlasting life.
What an exciting announcement. I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about this because we can see the end is so close. And really, isn't the main thing that we should be thinking about is helping people to know Jehovah? That's the prime goal. So the governing body is helping us to see how to have this toolbox. We're all looking forward to see what's in the toolbox. And in addition to that, we've got a few other announcements to make. We'd like to inform you of some changes that are planned with regard to the study edition of the Watchtower. Now, since 2011, in English, we've been producing two different versions of the study edition. We've had the standard edition and the simplified, and each of those has filled a vital need. However, in recent months, the governing body has asked the writing committee to investigate ways to simplify the style of the standard edition. Additionally, the governing body has approved a new design for the standard edition, which allows for a larger font style and also has certain features that are only in the simplified edition, such as some expressions explained. So with this in mind, the governing body has decided as of January 1, 2019, they're going to combine both versions of the magazines. This will not only simplify our work, it'll also be less confusing, and we all will have the same magazine that we're using. Now, you'll be interested to note that many of the larger languages that were producing two editions, languages such as Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian, have recently already combined their editions, trying to simplify the language used in their standard edition. And this has been very successful. We will continue to produce an electronic version of the English Simplified magazine, and that will be used mainly by translators to help them to make sure their translation is still clear and understandable. Now, in addition, we'd like to let you know that early next year we'll be receiving a new publication, and it will be one of the ones that we use in the toolbox. It is called How to Remain in God's Love. And you see it here on the screen. It's 256 pages, and it uses the same simplified style as the Teach Us book. So it's going to replace the current God's Love book. These two publications, that is How to Remain in God's Love and the Teach Us books, will be used in the toolbox for helping students to become disciples. So we look forward to you getting that. Well, I know we'll be going away from here, our minds and hearts spinning around, thinking of all the interesting changes and developments. Well, an announcement, of course, we'd like to make is with regard to the attendance. We haven't got all the attendance figures yet, but you'll be pleased to know up to this point, the combined attendance for the program is 671,126. 671,126. Of course, on Sunday, thousands more will enjoy the program as they're tied in throughout the United States. Now, another important announcement, maybe a little more mundane after all these other exciting ones, but it will affect you here at Warwick. The following information is for the benefit of all corporate members and their guests who attended the program here at Warwick. A pre-packaged meal will be provided for you and your guest in approximately 30 minutes in the dining room. In view of the limited seating, some corporate members and their guests have been pre-assigned to enjoy the meal in an alternate location at Warwick. Those assigned to the alternate meal locations should meet their guests in a few minutes in an area other than the dining room and proceed to their pre-assigned meal location. This will allow the tables in the dining room to be cleaned quickly for use by others. For those who prefer to take the meal to their room, pre-packaged meals can be obtained from the serving lines that are located on the auditorium level of this building and in the hallway heading toward the residence buildings. Bethel family members who viewed the program in their room and were unable to pick up pre-packaged meals from the supper lines last night may use these lines on the basement level as well. This arrangement will minimize congestion in the dining room. So you see the whole point there, minimize congestion in the dining room. Okay, the buses returning to Fishkill, Patterson and Warwick will depart at 5 p.m. from the main lobby. If any of your guests park their car in an off-site parking lot, the shuttles to those parking areas will depart from the main lobby at 3:30, 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. Well, it's hard for us to believe that this day that we were waiting for so long has actually come to a conclusion. But are you glad you made the effort to come along? On behalf of the governing body, we would like to thank all of you who have gone to a lot of effort and expense to be here. And we thank especially all those over the last few years that have worked so hard in building this project to Jehovah's praise. We wish you Jehovah's blessing, and we look forward to how you are effectively going to use our new toolbox. Well, let's sing a song of praise to Jehovah, an appropriate one again. This one is song number 91. At the conclusion of the song, we're going to ask a long-time servant of Jehovah, brother Vidmaris from the Australasia branch, to offer a word of